New York City, February, 11:45 p.m. The wind didn't just blow, it bit. It was a vicious, freezing animal tearing through the concrete canyons of Manhattan. The air temperature was 14 degrees, but the wind chill pushed it down to a numbering 5 below zero. It was the kind of cold that didn't just hurt, it killed. Maya pulled the thin, worn fabric of her oversized coat tighter around her swollen belly. It was a futile gesture. The cold found every tear, every loose seam, sinking its teeth into her skin. She was 8 months pregnant, and she looked less like a woman and more like a pile of discarded laundry shivering against the brick wall of a service alley. Her breath plumed in thick, white clouds in front of her cracked lips. 86 hours. That's how long it had been since her last real meal, half a stale bagel she'd found behind a deli in Queens. Now the hunger was a physical entity, a clawing beast inside her gut that rivaled the freezing wind outside. But the hunger wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the movement. Inside her, the baby kicked. It was a strong, urgent jab against her ribs. "SHHH, little one, I know, Maya whispered, her voice raspy and broken. She rubbed her frostbitten hands over the taut skin of her abdomen, trying to transfer some non-existent warmth to the life growing inside her. Just a little longer, Mama's trying. She wasn't a beggar, not really, not in her heart. 6 months ago, she had a job as a paralegal. She had an apartment in Brooklyn. She had a husband she thought loved her. Then came the gambling debts he'd hidden, the loan sharks banging on their door at 3 a.m., and finally, the morning she woke up to find him gone, along with their savings, the rent money, and her dignity. The eviction notice came 3 days later. The slide from respectability to homelessness had been terrifyingly fast. Now, she was here, invisible to the hundreds of people hurrying past her in their Canada Goose jackets, desperate to get into their warm Ubers. Maya pushed herself away from the wall. Her legs, swollen and wrapped in layers of old newspaper beneath her jeans to keep out the damp, screamed in protest. She stumbled toward the large, industrial dumpsters behind the towering glass facade of the Le Bernardin restaurant in Midtown. The smell wafting from the kitchen vents was intoxicating, rich butter, roasted garlic, searing seafood. It made her mouth water so instantly it was painful. She reached the first dumpster, her fingers numb inside cheap woolen gloves with holes in the thumbs. She lifted the heavy plastic lid, praying. Sometimes they threw away mistakes. Overcooked steaks, day-old bread rolls, anything. She peered inside, empty cardboard boxes, broken glass, nothing edible. Tears of pure, exhausting frustration welled in her eyes, instantly freezing on her cheeks. She slammed the lid down, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the frozen alley. The baby kicked again, harder this time, a protest against the empty calories. She couldn't do this. She was going to pass out. And if she passed out here tonight in this cold, neither she nor her baby would wake up. Desperation is a powerful drug. It overrides shame. It overrides fear. It overrides pride. Maya looked at the glowing side entrance of the restaurant. It was the valet pickup area. Warm golden light spilled onto the icy pavement. She saw expensive cars pulling up, Bentleys, Mercedes S-classes. She took a shaky step toward the light. Just one plea, one act of human kindness. That's all she needed to survive the night. Inside the private dining room of Le Bernardin, the air was perfumed with the scent of black truffle and expensive cognac. The lighting was soft, flattering, and golden. It was quiet, save for the polite clinking of silver against fine china and the muted murmurs of billion-dollar conversations. Victor Sterling sat at the head of the table. He was 45, but looked younger, with eyes the color of chipped ice and a jawline that seemed carved from granite. He wore a bespoke Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people made in a year, and he wore it with the casual indifference of a man who owned a closet full of them. They called him the Iceman of Wall Street for a reason. He didn't make decisions based on gut feelings, he made them based on cold, hard data. He was ruthless, efficient, and utterly detached. "The acquisition is complete, gentlemen," Victor said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that commanded immediate silence in the room. He didn't smile. He rarely did. "Acme Corp is ours as of 9 a.m. tomorrow morning." A ripple of polite applause went around the table. His business partners, men worth hundreds of millions themselves, looked at Victor with a mixture of reverence and fear. A waiter, dressed in impeccable whites, approached Victor's side, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon 08. "More champagne, Mr. Sterling." Victor didn't look up from his phone, where he was already checking Asian market futures. He made a subtle, dismissive gesture with his left hand. No, clear the table. The waiter hesitated. On the table in front of Victor sat a plate of butter-poached lobster with caviar mousseline. It had barely been touched. A $600 appetizer, ignored because Victor had been too busy closing the deal while it was hot. Now it was lukewarm, therefore it was garbage. "Sir, you haven't finished your lobster," the waiter ventured nervously. Victor finally looked up. His eyes were flat, devoid of warmth. "It's cold. I don't eat cold food, take it away." He stood up, signaling the end of the celebration. The meal meant nothing to him. The luxury meant nothing. It was just fuel, and if the fuel wasn't perfect, it was useless. Victor checked his Patek Philippe watch. 11:55 p.m. Time to go back to the penthouse tower that overlooked Central Park, the silent, cavernous glass palace where he lived alone. He shrugged into his heavy cashmere overcoat, black as night, and signaled to his head of security, a massive ex-Navy SEAL named Brutus. "Car, now," Victor commanded. He walked toward the exit, his mind already on tomorrow's markets, completely unaware that a collision course with destiny was waiting for him just on the other side of the glass doors. The warmth inside the Bentley was immediate, a stark contrast to the brutal cold outside. It smelled of rich leather and a faint, expensive cologne, sandalwood and something metallic like cold cash. Maya sat hunched in the corner of the expansive back seat, the oversized cashmere coat engulfing her frame. She was still shivering, but the violent tremors were beginning to subside as the heated seats seeped warmth into her frozen bones. She didn't dare look at the man sitting next to her. Victor Sterling was a silhouette against the passing city lights, a statue carved from shadow and power. He hadn't spoken a word since his command to the driver. He just stared out the window, his jaw set hard, his hand still clenched in a fist on his knee. The silence in the car was suffocating. Maya's mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of fear and confusion. Who was this man? Why had he done this? The way he had looked at her outside, it hadn't been pity. Pity she was used to, it was soft, fleeting, and usually came with a dollar bill and a quick dismissal. This had been something else. It was intense, terrifying, and bizarrely personal. It felt like he was looking through her, searching for something he both desperately wanted to see and was terrified to find. And now he was taking her, where? To the police, to a shelter. The thought of a shelter, usually a place of dread, now seemed like a haven compared to the terrifying unknown of this man's intentions. The car glided to a stop. Maya risked a glance out the window. They weren't at a police station. They were in front of a towering glass and steel skyscraper that pierced the night sky, its pinnacle lost in the clouds. It was one of those buildings that screamed wealth and exclusivity, the kind of place where the doorman wore uniforms nicer than any clothes she had ever owned. "Out," Victor said, his voice a low rumble that made Maya jump. It wasn't a shout, but it carried the weight of absolute command. The driver opened her door. The cold air rushed back in, a stark reminder of the reality she had just escaped. She fumbled with the heavy coat, trying to slide out without tripping. Brutus, the security guard who had shoved her, was there, offering a stiff hand to help her. His face was a mask of professional neutrality, but she caught a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Victor was already walking toward the entrance, not waiting for her. He swept through the revolving doors as if he owned the building, which she realized with a jolt he probably did. Maya followed, feeling small and exposed despite the massive coat. The lobby was a cavernous space of polished marble, soaring ceilings, and abstract sculptures that looked like frozen explosions of metal. It was silent, pristine, and intimidating. A concierge behind a desk that looked like a slab of ancient stone stood up as Victor approached. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," the concierge said, his voice hushed and deferential. He glanced at Maya, his eyes widening slightly before quickly snapping back to Victor. He was a professional. He knew better than to question the strange whims of the building's most prominent resident. Victor didn't acknowledge the greeting. He walked straight to a private elevator bank tucked away from the main ones. He pressed his hand against a biometric scanner. The doors slid open instantly. He stepped inside and turned, looking at Maya. It was a clear invitation, or rather an order. Maya hesitated. This was it. The point of no return. Stepping into that elevator felt like stepping off a cliff. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back into the cold, familiar misery of the street. At least there she knew the rules. "Are you coming?" Victor asked, his voice flat, emotionless. Maya looked at him, then down at her swollen belly. The baby kicked again, a gentle reminder of the life she was responsible for. She was freezing, starving, and exhausted. She had no other choice. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing them in a small, luxurious metal box. The ascent was smooth and silent, so fast her ears popped. Victor stood with his back to her, watching the floor numbers tick upward on a digital display. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. Maya felt the need to break it, to say something, anything, to acknowledge the bizarre reality of the situation. "Sir," she began, her voice small and trembling. "Thank you for the coat. For this, I don't know how to repay you." Victor didn't turn around. "You don't." "But I can't just take this, it's too much. I'll find a way, I promise, once I'm back on my feet." "Be quiet," he said. It wasn't angry. It was just a statement of fact. A dismissal. Maya shut her mouth, her face burning with shame. Of course, he didn't want her gratitude. He probably just wanted her to stop talking. She shrank back against the wall of the elevator, wishing she could disappear. The elevator slowed and then stopped. The doors opened directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A palace in the sky. Maya gasped. She had seen luxury in magazines, in movies, but this was on a different level entirely. It was a sprawling, open-concept penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the glittering city below. Central Park was a vast, dark rectangle spread out beneath them. The floors were polished dark wood, covered in massive, plush cream-colored rugs. The furniture was sleek, modern, and looked incredibly uncomfortable. Everything was white, gray, or black. There were no personal items, no photos, no knickknacks. It looked like a museum exhibit, not a home. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly lifeless. A woman in a severe gray uniform appeared from a hallway, looking flustered. This was Mrs. Albright, the house manager. She was a woman in her late 50s with hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful and a perpetual pinched expression. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her eyes darting to Maya and widening in horror. "You're back early and you have a guest." Her tone made it clear that guest was not the word she wanted to use. "Yes," Victor said, walking past her into the living room. "This is..." He stopped. He realized he didn't even know her name. He turned to Maya, looking at her for the first time since they had entered the building. "What is your name?" "Maya," she whispered. "Maya Sharma." "Maya," Victor repeated, testing the word on his tongue. It sounded strange, foreign in this sterile environment. "Maya will be staying with us for a while. Prepare the guest suite in the East Wing, the one with the park view." Mrs. Albright looked like she might faint. The East Wing guest suite was the finest in the penthouse, usually reserved for visiting heads of state or Fortune 500 CEOs. The East Wing suite, sir, but is she, she stammered, her eyes raking over Maya's filthy clothes, the mud caked on her knees, the matted hair. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Albright?" Victor's voice was soft, dangerous. "No, sir, of course not. I'll see to it immediately." She shot a look of pure venom at Maya before hurrying away. Victor turned back to Maya. "You're hungry." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Maya admitted, her stomach growling loudly at the mention of food. Victor walked to a wall panel and pressed a button. "Chef, I need food in the living room. Now something warm, comforting." He paused, then added, "and plenty of it." He didn't wait for an acknowledgement. He walked over to an expansive bar area and poured himself a generous measure of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He took a large gulp, his back to her again. Maya stood in the middle of the massive living room, still wrapped in his coat, feeling like an alien creature that had been dropped onto a different planet. She was afraid to move, afraid to touch anything, afraid to breathe too loudly. Within minutes, a man in chef's whites appeared, pushing a sleek serving cart. He looked as surprised as Mrs. Albright had been, but he was more professional about it. He laid out a feast on the coffee table, a large bowl of steaming roasted chicken soup with vegetables, a basket of warm, crusty bread, a plate of creamy risotto, and a small steak. The smell was overwhelming. Maya's knees almost buckled. "Eat," Victor said from the bar, not looking around. Maya didn't need to be told twice. She practically fell onto the plush sofa and reached for the bread. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She tore off a hunk and shoved it into her mouth, not caring about crumbs or manners. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. She ate like a starving animal, gulping down the soup, devouring the risotto. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear splashed onto her hand. She wiped it away angrily, ashamed of her weakness, but the tears kept coming. It was relief, pure, overwhelming relief. Victor turned from the bar, glass in hand. He watched her eat. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, a silent sentinel, his eyes fixed on her face. He watched the way she ate with a desperate, primal urgency. He watched the tears tracking through the dirt on her cheeks. And as he watched, that same bizarre, terrifying emotion stirred in his chest again. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in decades. It was a crack in the ice. He didn't know what he was doing. He had no plan. He had acted on pure, blind instinct, something he never did. He had brought a stranger, a pregnant beggar, into his sanctuary. He had exposed himself, his home, his life to what? He looked at her eyes again. They were focused on the food, wide with gratitude and hunger. You matter. The voice in his head was loud, clear, and impossibly old. Victor took another long drink of his scotch. He was a man who lived by logic, by calculated risks and guaranteed returns. This was insanity. This was a variable he couldn't control, a chaotic element introduced into his perfectly ordered system. And yet he couldn't send her away. Not yet. Not while those eyes were looking at him. He had to know, he had to be sure. Was it just a coincidence, a trick of the light and his own tired mind? Or was it something else, something impossible? He watched her finish the last of the risotto, scraping the plate clean. She sat back, letting out a sigh of pure contentment, her hand resting on her belly. Victor put his glass down with a sharp click on the marble bar top. The sound made Maya jump. She looked up at him, fear creeping back into her eyes now that the immediate need for food was met. "Mrs. Albright will show you to your room," Victor said, his voice back to its usual cold, clipped tone. "There are clothes laid out. A bath has been drawn. Get cleaned up." He started to walk toward a hallway that presumably led to his own private quarters. "Wait," Maya said, finding her voice. She stood up, the coat slipping off her shoulders to reveal her tattered, dirty clothes. "Please, tell me why. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" Victor stopped. He didn't turn around. He stood there for a long moment, his back a rigid wall of expensive black wool. "I don't want anything from you," he said finally. "Then why? People like you don't help people like me, not without a reason." Victor half-turned, his profile sharp against the city lights. "And what do you know about people like me? I know you don't see us. I know we're invisible to you until we're in your way. I know you threw away food tonight that could have fed me for a week because it was a little cold." Victor flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but Maya saw it. "You saw that," he stated. "I was watching you. From the alley, I saw you signal the waiter. I saw the lobster." Victor turned fully to face her now. His expression was unreadable. "And yet here you are, eating my food in my home." "Because I had no choice," Maya cried, her voice rising with sudden passion. "Because I was freezing and starving and my baby was going to die. Do you think I wanted to beg? Do you think I wanted to take your charity? I had a life. I had pride. It was taken from me, all of it." She was shaking again, but this time it was from anger, from the pent-up humiliation of the last few months spilling over. Victor stared at her. The fire in her eyes, the defiance in her posture, it was mesmerizing. She was dirty, pregnant, and powerless, yet she was standing in his multi-million-dollar penthouse yelling at him. He liked it. A corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was the closest thing to one that had been on his face in years. "Go to your room, Maya," he said softly. "Get some sleep, we'll talk tomorrow." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of his own home. Maya watched him go, more confused than ever. She was full, she was warm, and she was safe for the night. But she was also terrified. She was trapped in a golden cage with a man who was a complete mystery, a man who looked at her as if she were a ghost. She turned to see Mrs. Albright waiting for her, her face a mask of disapproval. "This way," the housekeeper snapped, turning on her heel. Maya followed her into the unknown, leaving the empty plates and the lingering scent of Victor's expensive cologne behind in the silent, cavernous living room. The first night of her new life had begun, and she had no idea if it was a salvation or a different kind of hell. The East Wing guest suite was larger than the entire apartment Maya had shared with her husband before everything fell apart. Mrs. Albright opened the double mahogany doors and stepped aside, her posture stiff with silent disapproval. "These are your quarters," she clipped. "Mr. Sterling insists you have the best view." Maya stepped inside and gasped softly. The room was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury. A king-sized bed dominated the center, dressed in linens so white they seemed to glow. One entire wall was glass, offering a dizzying, uninterrupted vista of Central Park spread out like a dark, sleeping beast below, ringed by the sparkling lights of the city. It was breathtaking. It was also terrifying. There were no curtains visible, just endless exposed glass. Maya felt like a specimen in a very expensive jar. "The bathroom is through there," Mrs. Albright pointed to a frosted glass door. "Towels are stacked. Soap is imported. Try not to make a mess. These floors are Italian marble, and they stain if you look at them wrong." "Thank you," Maya whispered, clutching the lapels of Victor's massive coat tighter around her. She felt filthy in these pristine surroundings. Every step she took seemed to leave an invisible smudge of the street behind. "There are clothes in the closet. Mr. Sterling had them sent over from a boutique downstairs. They should fit your condition." Mrs. Albright looked at Maya's belly with undisguised distaste. "Breakfast is served at 7 a.m. sharp. Mr. Sterling does not tolerate lateness. Do not come down until you are presentable." With that, the housekeeper turned on her heel and left, closing the heavy doors with a decisive click that sounded suspiciously like a lock engaging. Maya was alone. She moved toward the bathroom like a sleepwalker. The room was cavernous, clad in white marble veined with gray. A soaking tub big enough for 4 people sat in the center. She shed Victor's heavy coat, folding it carefully and placing it on a bench, terrified of getting dirt on it. Then, piece by piece, she peeled off her own layers. The worn jeans stiff with frozen mud, the 3 threadbare sweaters, the t-shirt that hadn't been washed in a week. When she caught sight of herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, she flinched. She looked skeletal, her collarbones jutting out sharply. Her face was gaunt, streaked with grime, her eyes huge and hollowed out by exhaustion. The only part of her that looked alive was her massive, swollen belly, protruding tautly from her thin frame. She stepped into the shower. It was an enormous rainfall-style fixture. She turned the handle, and hot water, glorious, unlimited hot water, cascaded down on her. Maya leaned against the marble tiles and sobbed. She cried until her throat was raw. She cried for the husband who had betrayed her, for the life she had lost, for the terrifying months on the street. But mostly, she cried from the sheer, overwhelming shock of safety. For tonight, she wouldn't freeze. For tonight, her baby wasn't hungry. She scrubbed herself raw with a bar of soap that smelled like lavender and money. She washed her hair 3 times until the water swirling down the drain ran clear instead of gray. When she finally stepped out, wrapped in a towel thick enough to be a blanket, she felt human again. Exhausted, deeply confused, but human. She walked into the massive walk-in closet. It was filled with clothes, not many but clearly expensive. High-end maternity wear in neutral tones, soft cashmere sweaters, silk lounge pants, stretch jersey dresses. They still had the tags on them. She chose the simplest thing she could find, a soft gray oversized t-shirt and a pair of black maternity leggings. They felt like silk against her scrubbed skin. Maya climbed into the gargantuan bed. The sheets were cool, impossibly smooth Egyptian cotton. The mattress seemed to embrace her tired body. It was heaven, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the dark, staring out at the city lights below. It felt unreal. It felt like a trap. Why? The question replayed in her mind on a loop. Why would a man like Victor Sterling, a man known for being colder than the winter wind, take her in? He hadn't looked at her with lust. He hadn't looked at her with pity. He had looked at her with recognition. She remembered the intensity in his ice-blue eyes back in the living room. "I don't want anything from you." Maya placed a hand on her belly. The baby was quiet now, soothed by the food and warmth. "We have to be careful, little one," she whispered into the darkness. "This isn't a fairy tale. Rich men don't save poor girls for nothing. We need to figure out the price before the bill comes due." Victor Sterling was not sleeping. He sat in his study, a room that looked more like the command center of a battleship than a home office. 6 large monitors curved around his desk, displaying real-time financial data from Tokyo, London, and Hong Kong. But Victor wasn't looking at the markets. His eyes were fixed on a separate, smaller monitor to the side. It displayed a high-definition, infrared live feed from the East Wing guest suite. He watched Maya sleeping. She was curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the other resting protectively over her unborn child. Even in sleep, her brow was furrowed with tension. Victor took a sip of aged scotch, the crystal glass cold against his fingers. He knew what this looked like. He knew what people would think if they saw him watching her. A perversion, an obsession, but it wasn't sexual, it was clinical. It was the need to solve a puzzle that had just blown a 30-year-old hole in his carefully constructed armor. He leaned forward, zooming the camera in slightly on her face. In the green glow of the night vision, the resemblance was still uncanny. The curve of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. It had to be her. It had to be the daughter of the waitress from that diner in Chicago. The universe didn't deal in coincidences that massive, but knowing wasn't enough. Victor Sterling needed proof. He needed data. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that was answered on the first ring despite the hour. "Yeah," a gruff voice answered. This was Miller, the best and most expensive private investigator in the city, a man who used to work for the CIA and now found dirt for billionaires. "I need a full background check on someone," Victor said, his voice low. "A woman named Maya Sharma, roughly 26 years old, currently homeless in Manhattan, pregnant." There was a pause on the other end. "A homeless pregnant woman, you calling me at 2 a.m. for charity cases now, Vic?" "I want everything, Miller, where she was born, who her parents were, specifically her mother, where her mother worked in the late 80s. I want her marriage records, financial history, every address she's ever had, and I want to know who put her on the street." All right, the husband sounds like the easiest lead. When do you need it?" "Yesterday, put your best team on it, price is no object." Victor hung up. He looked back at the monitor. Maya had shifted, murmuring something in her sleep. He felt that strange twinge in his chest again. He hated it. It was a weakness, an uncontrolled variable. He had spent his life eliminating variables. He told himself this was just due diligence. If she was who he thought she was, he owed a debt. He would pay it financially, set her up with an apartment, some cash, and send her on her way. That was the logical, transactional way to handle it. But as he watched her sleep in his bed, under his roof, he knew it wasn't going to be that simple. He had brought chaos into his sterile world, and he had a sinking feeling he wouldn't be able to just escort it out the door when he was done with it. The next morning, 8:30 a.m., Maya woke up disoriented. For a terrifying second, she thought she was back in the alley, that the warmth was just a cruel dream. Then she opened her eyes and saw the sprawling vista of Central Park bathed in cold morning light. Reality crashed back in. The penthouse. Victor Sterling. She sat up, her body aching less than it had yesterday. She felt clean. She wasn't hungry. It was a miracle. She looked at the digital clock by the bed. 8:30 a.m. Panic surged through her. Mrs. Albright had said breakfast was at 7 sharp. Mr. Sterling does not tolerate lateness. Maya scrambled out of bed, her heart pounding. She had already messed up on day one. She quickly brushed her teeth with the sealed toothbrush provided in the bathroom and tried to tame her wild, curly hair with water. She kept on the leggings and oversized t-shirt she had slept in. They were clean and covered her. She didn't dare touch the other clothes in the closet. It felt too presumptuous. She opened the heavy bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway. It was silent as a tomb. "Hello?" she called out softly. No answer. She slowly made her way back toward the massive living room where she had eaten last night. The penthouse felt even bigger in the daylight, vast expanses of white marble and towering glass walls. The living room was empty. The mess from her dinner had been cleared away as if it never existed. Maya stood in the middle of the room, feeling ridiculously out of place. She wrapped her arms around herself. What was she supposed to do? Sit? Wait. Then she heard the whine of the private elevator ascending. Thank God. Victor was back. Maybe she could apologize for oversleeping and ask what the plan was for today. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, but it wasn't Victor. A woman stepped out. She was stunning in that glossy, high-maintenance New York way. She was tall and razor-thin, dressed in a cream-colored Chanel power suit that probably cost more than Maya's entire paralegal salary used to be. Her blonde hair was blown out to perfection, and her makeup was flawless armor. She was carrying a tiny, shaking chihuahua in a Louis Vuitton carrier and holding a steaming matcha latte. She strode into the apartment as if she owned it, kicking off her Louboutin heels by the door without looking down. "Victor, darling, I know I'm early, but the traffic was murder and I just had to." She stopped dead. She had seen Maya. The woman lowered her sunglasses slowly, her perfectly manicured eyebrows shooting up. Her gaze raked over Maya from head to toe, taking in the messy hair, the oversized t-shirt, the swollen belly, and the bare feet on the expensive rug. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the look one might give a particularly large cockroach that had wandered into a Michelin star restaurant. "Who the hell are you?" the woman demanded. Her voice was sharp and brittle, losing all its affected warmth. Maya swallowed hard, taking an instinctive step back. I'm Maya." "Maya." The woman repeated the name like it tasted bad. "And what, pray tell, are you doing in my fiancé's penthouse looking like something the cat dragged in from the Gowanus Canal?" "Fiancé." Maya's stomach dropped. Of course Victor was engaged. Of course he was attached to someone like this, someone who fit in this glass tower. This was Candace Van Der Woodson, a socialite heiress whose family money was old New York, even if her current career was vaguely defined as influencer and philanthropist. She was marrying Victor in what everyone knew was the merger of the decade, her social standing for his billions. "Mr. Sterling, he brought me here last night," Maya stammered, trying to maintain some dignity. "I was outside, I needed help." Candace let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Victor Sterling brought you here. Oh honey, you're going to have to do better than that. Victor doesn't do help. He doesn't even make eye contact with people who make less than 7 figures. She took a step closer, her perfume, something heavy and floral cloying in the air. "Did you sneak in? Is that it? Did you bribe the night concierge? I don't know what your game is, you pregnant little grifter, but you picked the wrong house." "I'm not a grifter," Maya said, her voice trembling but firm. "And I didn't sneak in, ask him." "Oh, I intend to," Candace snapped. She pulled out her phone. "Right after I call security to have you dragged out of here and sanitized." Before she could dial, the elevator chimed again. Both women turned. Victor stepped out. He was dressed for war on Wall Street, a charcoal gray suit cut so sharply it could draw blood, a crisp white shirt, a dark navy tie. He looked immaculate, powerful, and utterly terrifying. He stopped when he saw the scene in his living room. His eyes flicked from Candace, who was bristling with outrage, to Maya, who was standing small and defensive in the center of the room. For a moment, his face was a mask. Then a slight shadow crossed his eyes as he looked at Maya's bare feet on the cold marble. "Victor!" Candace cried, rushing toward him, the tiny dog yapping in her arms. "Thank God you're here. You won't believe this. I walk in and find this person standing in your living room. She claims you brought her here. I was just about to call Brutus to have her removed." Victor didn't look at his fiancée. He walked right past her toward Maya. Candace stopped, stunned at being ignored. Victor stopped 3 feet from Maya. He looked her over, his gaze clinical but intense. "You slept late," he said. "It wasn't an accusation, just an observation." "I'm sorry," Maya said quickly. "The bed was. I haven't slept in a bed in a long time. I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter," Victor interrupted. He gestured vaguely at her appearance. "Mrs. Albright was supposed to ensure you had proper clothes. She showed me the closet. I didn't want to touch anything without asking." Victor made a low noise in his throat, something between annoyance and understanding. "Victor, what is going on?" Candace demanded, her voice shrill. She stalked over to where they stood. "Who is she, and why are you talking to her about clothes instead of throwing her out?" Victor finally turned to Candace. His expression was one of mild boredom, as if she were a minor scheduling conflict. "Candace, this is Maya. She is staying here as my guest." Candace's jaw literally dropped. "Your guest? Are you insane? Look at her, she's a hobo, Victor, a pregnant hobo. You don't have guests like this. You have senators and CEOs as guests. You hate people, especially messy, poor people." Maya flinched at the words, humiliation burning her cheeks. She wanted to run back to the elevator, back to the cold street where she belonged. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Careful, Candace," Victor said, his voice dangerously soft. "You are speaking about a guest in my home." Candace looked like she'd been slapped. Victor never defended anyone, ever, but why? Candace sputtered, gesturing wildly at Maya's protruding belly. "Is it? Victor, is it yours? Did you knock up some streetwalker?" Maya gasped. "No, I never met him before last night." Victor didn't even blink at the accusation. "Don't be absurd, Candace, it's beneath you, and it bores me." He turned back to Maya, dismissing Candace entirely again. "I have meetings until 3, Victor said to Maya, checking his watch. "Mrs. Albright has instructions to take you shopping today. Real clothes, not just pajamas. You need a winter coat, shoes that fit." "Shopping?" Maya whispered, overwhelmed. "Sir, I don't have any money." "I didn't ask if you had money. I said you are going shopping. It's being billed to my account." He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black credit card. He held it out to her. Maya stared at it. It was a Centurion card, the black card. It had no limit. Holding it felt like holding a live grenade. "I can't take that," she said, backing away. Victor stepped closer, invading her personal space. He took her hand, his fingers cool and firm, and pressed the card into her palm. "Take it," he commanded. "You are living in my house now. You will not walk around looking like a victim. Fix it." It was an order, not a gift. He turned on his heel and headed back toward the elevator without another word. Candace stood frozen, watching this impossible exchange. Her fiancé, the man who checked restaurant bills for rounding errors, had just handed a homeless woman an unlimited credit card. As the elevator doors began to close on Victor, Candace spun around to glare at Maya. The shock on her face had been replaced by pure, venomous hatred. Victor might be playing some strange game, Candace thought, but she wasn't about to let this dirty little interloper ruin the merger of the decade. "Enjoy the shopping spree, honey," Candace hissed, stepping close to Maya, her voice dripping with poison. "Because don't get too comfortable. I don't know what trick you pulled on him last night, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, you'll wish you de-stayed in that gutter." She grabbed her matcha latte and stalked off toward the master bedroom wing, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Maya stood alone in the vast, sunlit room, holding the black card in one hand and clutching her belly with the other. She was warm, clean, and suddenly rich. But as she looked around the silent glass tower, she realized with a chilling certainty that she had just traded the dangers of the street for a different kind of war zone. And she had no idea what the rules were. The Black Centurion card felt impossibly heavy in Maya's pocket, a cold weight against her thigh. She sat in the back of a plush Mercedes sedan, watching the city blur past. Mrs. Albright sat rigidly beside her, radiating silent disapproval. "We will go to Bergdorf's," Mrs. Albright announced, her voice clipped. "Mr. Sterling insists on quality, though I dare say a trip to Target would have been sufficient." Maya didn't respond. She was too busy trying not to stare openly at the chauffeur, the leather interior, the sheer luxury of it all. It felt like a hallucination. Bergdorf Goodman was a temple of excess. Maya had only ever seen the outside, pressing her face against the glass to marvel at the elaborate window displays. Stepping inside was like entering another world, a world of hushed voices, gleaming surfaces, and price tags that could feed a family for a year. Mrs. Albright marched Maya to the personal shopping department. A sleek, impeccably groomed woman named Chloe greeted them. "Mrs. Albright, always a pleasure," Chloe said smoothly, her eyes barely flickering over Maya's appearance. "In this world, you didn't question the eccentricities of the ultra-rich. And this must be the guest Mr. Sterling mentioned." "Yes," Mrs. Albright said, her tone making it clear what she thought of this guest. "Mr. Sterling wishes for her to be outfitted appropriately. Winter coat, boots, comfortable clothing for her. Condition. Nothing garish, just high quality and functional." Chloe nodded, already mentally calculating the commission. "Of course, right this way." Maya was led into a private fitting room that was larger than her old bedroom. Chloe disappeared and returned with an armful of clothes. What followed was a surreal blur of fabrics: soft cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers with elastic waistbands, silk blouses, and a down-filled puffer coat that felt as light as air but kept her incredibly warm. Maya tried everything on with a sense of detachment. It was like dressing a doll. She didn't recognize herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her with clean hair and expensive clothes looked normal. She looked like someone who belonged. But her eyes still held the haunted look of the street. The fear hadn't gone away, it had just been dressed up. When it was time to pay, Maya pulled out the black card with trembling fingers. Chloe took it without blinking. The total came to over $5,000. Maya nearly choked. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. She signed the receipt, her hand shaking so badly the signature was barely legible. "Shall we send these to the penthouse, Mrs. Albright?" Chloe asked. "Yes," Mrs. Albright said. "Except for the coat and boots. She'll wear those." As they left the store, Maya caught a glimpse of herself in a window reflection. The woman in the stylish winter coat and leather boots didn't look like a beggar anymore. She looked like a person with a future, but what future? The question gnawed at her. The penthouse. 4:00 p.m. Candace was pacing the living room, her little dog yapping at her heels. She was furious. Victor had embarrassed her, chosen a homeless woman over her, and then given that woman his credit card. It was unacceptable. She had spent the last few hours trying to dig up dirt on Maya, but had come up empty. The girl was a ghost. "Mrs. Albright," Candace barked as the housekeeper entered. "Where is she?" "In her room, Ms. Van der Woodson. I've had her new clothes sent up." "Good, now listen to me. Victor has lost his mind. I don't know what game this girl is playing, but I won't let her destroy everything I've worked for." Mrs. Albright nodded slowly. She didn't like Candace. The woman was shallow and cruel, but she disliked disorder even more, and Maya was the definition of disorder. What do you propose, Ms. Van der Woodson? We need to know who she is, and we need to know why Victor is so obsessed with her. You're here all day, watch her, listen to her, see if she makes any calls, if she leaves the apartment, anything. Mr. Sterling values his privacy, Mrs. Albright said nervously. Mr. Sterling is not thinking clearly. Candace snapped. He's being manipulated. It's our duty to protect him, and me, we're a team in this, Albright. Understood? Mrs. Albright hesitated, then nodded. I understand. Good, keep me informed, and Albright, make sure her stay here is as uncomfortable as possible. The East Wing Suite. 5:00 p.m. Maya was in her room, staring at the closet full of new clothes. It was overwhelming. She carefully hung up the coat and placed the boots by the door. She felt a strange sense of guilt. She didn't deserve this. All she had done was ask for food. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. It was dusk and the lights were starting to twinkle below. It was beautiful, but it felt distant, like looking at a picture. She placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked, strong and reassuring. We're safe for now, she whispered. That's all that matters. Suddenly, the door opened without a knock. It was Candace. Well, Candace said, sauntering into the room. Don't we look presentable? Maya turned, her heart rate picking up. Can I help you? Candace laughed. Help me? Oh, honey, you're the one who needs help. You think this is real? You think Victor actually cares about you? Maya didn't answer. He's using you, Candace said, her voice dripping with venom. I don't know what his angle is yet, but I will find out. He's a businessman, Maya. Everything is a transaction to him. You're just a new acquisition. Candace stepped closer, her perfume cloying. So here's the deal. You enjoy your little Cinderella moment, wear the clothes, eat the food, but don't forget who you are, and don't forget who I am. I'm the one he's marrying. I'm the one with the pedigree. You're just a temporary amusement. Candace turned and walked to the door. Oh, and by the way, dinner is at 8. Don't be late. Victor hates tardiness. She left, leaving Maya alone in the beautiful, cold room. Candace's words echoed in her head. A temporary amusement. Was that all she was? Maya went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She needed to stay focused. She needed to survive. For her baby, she would play this game. She would wear the clothes, eat the food, and follow the rules. But she wouldn't let her guard down, not for a second. She was in a gilded cage, and she knew that the most beautiful cages were often the hardest to escape. The clock on the penthouse wall read 7:58 p.m. Maya stood outside the dining room, her heart pounding. She was wearing one of the new outfits, a simple black silk blouse and trousers that felt impossibly soft against her skin. She had tried to tame her hair and had even applied a little of the lip balm she'd found in the bathroom. She took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy double doors. The dining room was cavernous, dominated by a long, polished mahogany table that could easily seat 20 people. Victor sat at the head, a solitary figure in the vast space. Candace was seated to his right, sipping a glass of red wine. Victor looked up as Maya entered. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment, taking in her transformed appearance. You're on time, he said, his voice low and even. Sit. He gestured to the chair on his left, opposite Candace. Maya walked to the chair, feeling Candace's hostile gaze burning into her. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. So Maya, Candace began, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Tell us about yourself. Victor said you were a paralegal. Where did you work? Maya hesitated. She didn't want to talk about her past, about the life that had been so cruelly taken from her. I worked at a small firm in Brooklyn. Oh, Brooklyn, Candace said, wrinkling her nose. How quaint. Your husband, what did he do? Maya's breath hitched. He was in finance. Finance, really? Candace said, raising an eyebrow. And yet you ended up on the street. How does that happen? Candace, Victor said, his voice a low warning. What? I'm just curious, darling. It's not every day we have a homeless person for dinner. Enough, Victor said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maya is my guest. You will treat her with respect. Candace glared at Victor, but she fell silent. She knew when not to push him. The first course was served, a delicate lobster bisque. Maya stared at the bowl, the rich aroma making her stomach churn. She hadn't had lobster since her honeymoon, a lifetime ago. She picked up her spoon, her hand still shaking. She took a small sip. It was delicious, rich and creamy. She forced herself to eat slowly, to savor every bite. Victor watched her, his gaze intense. He noted the way she held the spoon, the way she politely wiped her mouth with the linen napkin. Despite her circumstances, she had a quiet dignity, a refined grace that seemed out of place in a beggar. It reminded him of someone. The dinner continued in tense silence. Candace made a few more snide remarks, but Victor shut her down each time. Maya ate mechanically, her mind racing. She felt like she was in a play, performing a role she didn't understand. As the main course was cleared, Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up at Maya. "Excuse me," he said, standing up. "I have to take this." He walked out of the room, leaving Maya alone with Candace. Candace turned to Maya, her eyes flashing with venom. "Don't think you've won, honey. He's just intrigued, like a kid with a new toy. He'll get bored, and when he does, you'll be back on the street where you belong." Maya met Candace's gaze, her own eyes hardening. "I'm not a toy, Candace, and I'm not going back to the street, not if I can help it." Candace laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "We'll see about that." Victor closed the door to his study and answered the phone. "Miller, what do you have?" "It's interesting, Vic," the private investigator said, his voice crackling over the line. "This girl, Maya Sharma, she's not what she seems." "Explain." "Well, for starters, she's not from here. She grew up in Chicago." Victor's heart skipped a beat. "Chicago, go on." "Her mother's name was Sarah Sharma. Worked as a waitress at a diner called Betty's Place in the late 80s, early 90s. Victor closed his eyes. Sarah, Betty's Place. The names echoed in his mind, bringing back memories he had buried deep. The smell of stale coffee, the sound of clattering dishes, the warmth of a kind smile on a freezing night. "What happened to her?" Victor asked, his voice hoarse. "Died about 10 years ago. Cancer, bad business. Maya was just a kid. Her father took off years before that. Maya put herself through college, moved to New York, got a job as a paralegal, married a guy named Samir about 2 years ago. And the husband? A real piece of work, gambling addict, racked up huge debts, stole everything they had, and then skipped town about 6 months ago. Left Maya with nothing. She got evicted, couldn't find work because of the pregnancy, you know the rest." Victor was silent for a long moment. So it was true, she was Sarah's daughter, the daughter of the woman who had saved his life. "What about the baby?" Victor asked. "It's her husband's, Samir's." "Find him, Miller, find Samir." "You want me to bring him back?" "No," Victor said, his voice cold as ice. "I want you to make sure he never comes back." He hung up the phone. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights twinkled below, a million tiny stars. He had found her. After all these years, he had finally found the connection he had been searching for. But what now? He couldn't just tell her. She wouldn't believe him. She would think he was crazy, or worse, that he was trying to manipulate her. He had to handle this carefully. He had a debt to pay, a debt that could never truly be repaid. But he would try. He would protect Maya. He would protect her baby. He would give them the life they deserved, the life her mother should have had. But first, he had to deal with the threats within his own home. Candace. Mrs. Albright. They were snakes in the grass, waiting to strike. He needed to know who he could trust. And he needed to know if Maya was strong enough to survive in his world. He turned away from the window and walked back to the desk. He opened the safe and took out the old, faded photograph. He looked at the smiling face of Sarah Sharma, her eyes, Maya's eyes, twinkling with kindness. "I found her, Sarah," he whispered. "I found her." The days that followed blurred into a strange routine of luxury and isolation. Maya spent her time in the guest suite, the library, or on the expansive terrace overlooking the park. She was warm, she was fed, and she was safe. But she was also deeply lonely. Victor was a ghost. He left before she woke up and returned long after she had gone to her room. Their only interactions were brief, stiff encounters in the hallway or silent meals if he happened to be home for dinner. He would ask about her health, about the baby, but his tone was always clinical, distant. He never offered any information about himself, and he never gave her a straight answer about why she was there. "Are you comfortable?" he would ask. "Yes, thank you, but Victor, I need to know. What is the plan? I can't stay here forever." "You are safe here, that is what matters." And that would be the end of the conversation. He would retreat to his study, leaving Maya with more questions than answers. The only other people she interacted with were Mrs. Albright and the staff. They were polite but cold. They treated her like an unwelcome guest, a temporary inconvenience. Mrs. Albright in particular seemed to take pleasure in making Maya feel small. She would make subtle comments about Maya's background, about the cost of the food she ate, about the inconvenience of having a pregnant woman in the house. "Cook prepared the salmon specially for you," Mrs. Albright would say, placing a plate in front of Maya. It's wild caught, of course, very expensive. Or, Mr. Sterling is very generous. Most men in his position wouldn't bother with charity cases. Maya would grit her teeth and say nothing. She knew Mrs. Albright was trying to provoke her to make her snap, and she wouldn't give her the satisfaction. But the worst was Candace. She came by the penthouse almost every day, always with a new insult or a new scheme to undermine Maya. She would make comments about Maya's appearance, her lack of sophistication, her dependency on Victor. "You know, Victor is just going through a phase," Candace said one afternoon, finding Maya on the terrace. "He likes to rescue things, like that three-legged dog he found when we were first dating. He got bored of it after a month and sent it to live on a farm." She leaned in close, her breath smelling of mint and malice. "You're just another stray, Maya, and soon you'll be sent back to the pound." Maya felt a sting of tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm not a dog, Candace, and Victor is not. He's not like that." "Oh, honey," Candace laughed. "You have no idea what Victor is like. You see the hero. I see the man who would sell his own mother for a profit. He's a shark, Maya, and sharks don't have feelings." Maya didn't believe her. She had seen the look in Victor's eyes that first night. She had seen the flicker of something else, something that wasn't cold or calculating. But Candace's words planted a seed of doubt. What if she was right? What if this was all just some twisted game to Victor? One evening, Victor came home earlier than usual. On Maya in the library, reading a book about ancient history. "You like history?" he asked, his voice startling her. "Yes," Maya said, closing the book. "It's interesting to see how things change and how they stay the same." Victor nodded as if this was a profound statement. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city. "I have to go away for a few days," he said, not looking at her. "Business in Tokyo." Maya felt a flash of panic. "Tokyo? For how long?" "A week, maybe more." "But what about me? What about?" "You will stay here. Mrs. Albright will take care of you. Brutus will be here for security." He turned to face her. "You will be safe, Maya, I promise." There it was again, that look, intense, searching, and something protective. "Victor," Maya said, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this?" Victor hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might actually tell her. He opened his mouth but then closed it again. "Because I can," he said simply. He walked out of the library, leaving Maya alone with her questions. The next morning he was gone. The penthouse felt emptier, colder without him, and with the cat away, the mice began to play. Candace arrived around noon, a look of triumph on her face. She marched straight to Maya's room, not bothering to knock. "Get up," she said, tossing a duffel bag onto the bed. "You're leaving?" Maya sat up, bewildered. "What, leaving? Where?" "Out, back to the street, where you belong." "But," Victor said. "Victor isn't here," Candace snapped. "And he won't be back for a week. By the time he returns, you'll be long gone, and I'll tell him you ran away, stole some jewelry, and took off." She grabbed Maya's arm and yanked her off the bed. "Come on, let's go." Maya tried to pull away. "No, get off me, Mrs. Albright, help." Mrs. Albright appeared in the doorway, her face passive. "Mrs. Albright, tell her Victor said I was to stay," Maya pleaded. Mrs. Albright looked at Candace, then back at Maya. "I take my orders from Ms. Van der Woodson when Mr. Sterling is away." Candace smiled, a cruel, triumphant smirk. "See, no one wants you here, now move." She dragged Maya out of the room and toward the private elevator. Maya struggled, but she was weak from the pregnancy and the fear. Candace was surprisingly strong. They reached the elevator. Candace pressed the button. The doors slid open. Standing there was Brutus. He looked from Candace to Maya, his expression unreadable. "Going somewhere, Ms. Van der Woodson?" Brutus asked, his voice a low rumble. "Yes, Brutus, we're escorting this person out of the building, Mr. Sterling's orders." Brutus didn't move. "I don't recall Mr. Sterling giving that order." "I am his fiancée," Candace shrieked. "My orders are his orders." Brutus took a step forward, towering over Candace. "Mr. Sterling's orders were very clear. Ms. Sharma is to remain here, and she is to be protected. From everyone." He looked pointedly at Candace. Candace faltered. She knew she couldn't intimidate Brutus. He answered only to Victor. "Fine," she spat, releasing Maya's arm. "Have it your way, but this isn't over. Victor will hear about this." She stomped back toward the living room, fuming. Maya leaned against the wall, trembling. Brutus looked at her, his face softening slightly. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Yes," Maya whispered. "Thank you, Brutus." "Just doing my job, ma'am." He escorted her back to her room, standing guard outside the door. Maya lay on the bed, her heart pounding. She was safe for now, but she knew Candace wouldn't give up. She was trapped in a beautiful prison, surrounded by enemies with only a silent bodyguard for protection. And the man who had put her there was thousands of miles away, leaving her to fight a battle she didn't understand. As she lay there, she realized something. Victor might have saved her from the cold, but he had thrown her into a different kind of fire. And she wasn't sure if she would survive it. With Victor halfway across the world in Tokyo, the penthouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with unspoken hostility. Mrs. Albright's passive-aggressive behavior turned ice-cold. She stopped speaking to Maya entirely, communicating only in sharp nods and disapproving sniffs. Meals were dropped off in the suite with a clatter, often cold. If Maya asked for something extra towels, a glass of water, it would arrive hours later if at all. It was petty but effective. It was a constant reminder that she was an intruder, tolerated only because of a distant master's inexplicable command. Maya spent most of her time in her room. She felt safer there, with Brutus stationed just down the hall. The big bodyguard was the only person who looked at her without contempt. He didn't say much, but his presence was a solid, comforting wall against the hostility of the others. But the real danger wasn't the housekeeper's cold soup, it was Candace. Candace didn't come by for 2 days after the elevator incident. When she finally reappeared, her tactics had changed. The overt aggression was gone, replaced by a sugary, poisonous sweetness that was far more terrifying. "Maya, darling," she exclaimed, breezing onto the terrace where Maya was trying to get some fresh air. "It's freezing out here. Come inside, let's chat." Maya was wary. "Chat about what?" "Oh, just girl talk," Candace said with a brittle smile. She linked her arm through Maya's, her grip surprisingly tight, and led her into the living room. "I've been thinking," Candace said, sitting down and patting the sofa next to her. "We got off on the wrong foot. I was surprised, that's all. Victor is so unpredictable, but if you're going to be staying for a while, we should try to get along." Maya sat down slowly, keeping her distance. "Okay. Tell me about the baby," Candace said, her eyes glittering. "Do you know what you're having?" I don't know for sure. I haven't had a scan in months. I think it's a boy, though." "A little boy, how sweet." Candace's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And the father, is he excited?" Maya flinched. "He's not involved." "Oh dear, another deadbeat. That's so sad. You know Victor had a terrible father. Did he ever tell you?" Maya shook her head. "Oh yes. A drunk, gambled away everything they had. Victor ended up on the streets when he was 15, just like you." Maya stared at her. "Victor was homeless," Candace laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on Maya's nerves. "Oh honey, he doesn't like to talk about it. It's his big, dark secret. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps, of course, became the great Iceman, but deep down, he's still that scared little street rat." She leaned in closer. "That's why he likes you, Maya. You remind him of where he came from. You're his little poverty pet. It makes him feel powerful to save you." The words were cruel, designed to make Maya feel small, to reduce Victor's kindness to a selfish ego trip. "He's not like that," Maya said, though a seed of doubt had been planted. "Isn't he?" Candace raised an eyebrow. "Has he ever asked you a single question about yourself? About who you are, not just what you need? Has he ever had a real conversation with you?" Maya fell silent. She couldn't argue with that. Victor was a wall. "See," Candace said triumphantly. "He doesn't care about you, Maya. He cares about how you make him feel about himself. And when that feeling wears off, poof, you'll be gone." Candace stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Anyway, just thought you should know the truth. It's better not to have illusions, don't you think?" She sauntered out, leaving Maya alone with her doubts. Was Candace right? Was she just a prop in Victor's psychodrama? Victor sat in the penthouse suite of the Ammon Tokyo, overlooking the sprawling, neon-lit city. It was the middle of the night, but he couldn't sleep. The meetings had been brutal, the negotiations high stakes, but his mind wasn't on business. It was on the grainy black and white feed on his laptop screen. He was watching Maya again. She was sitting on the terrace in New York, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the park. It was daytime there. She looked so small, so isolated against the vast backdrop of the city. He hated leaving her. He hated the feeling of not being in control, of leaving her exposed to Candace and Albright. He trusted Brutus, but Brutus was a hammer and Candace was a scalpel. His phone buzzed. It was Miller, the pie. "Vic, I got something on the husband, Samir." Victor sat up straighter. "Where is he?" "He's back in New York." Victor's hand clenched around the phone. "What?" "Yeah." Looks like he heard about his wife living in the lap of luxury. He's been sniffing around, asking questions in his old neighborhood, trying to find out where she is. Does he know about the penthouse? Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. This guy is desperate, Vic. He owes money to some very bad people. He sees Maya as his winning lottery ticket. A cold fury washed over Victor. This cockroach, this man who had destroyed Maya's life, was back to finish the job. Find him, Miller. Before he finds her. I'm on it, but Vic, what are you going to do when I find him? Victor looked at the screen at Maya's solitary figure. He remembered the fear in her eyes that first night, the desperation. I'm going to make him wish he'd never met her, Victor said, his voice so cold it could have frozen the air in the room. He hung up. He needed to get back. This deal in Tokyo could wait. Maya couldn't. He picked up his phone to call his pilot to prep the jet for an immediate departure. But before he could dial, his laptop screen flickered. The feed from the penthouse terrace cut out. Static. Victor frowned. He clicked on the other cameras, living room, kitchen, hallways, static, all of them. Someone had cut the feeds. A surge of pure adrenaline hit him. He dialed Brutus's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed the landline of the penthouse. No answer. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He was 7,000 miles away, and something was very, very wrong in his home. He didn't bother calling the pilot. He called his head of global security. Get a team to my penthouse. Now, full breach protocol, someone's inside. He slammed the laptop shut, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door, his mind a whirlwind of terror and rage. He had promised she would be safe. And he had failed. 10 minutes earlier. Maya was on the terrace when the power went out. The ambient noise of the city seemed to get louder as the hum of the penthouse's sophisticated systems died. She stood up, confused. A power outage in a building like this was unheard of. She walked back inside. The living room was dim. She called out for Mrs. Albright, but there was no answer. She went to the hallway looking for Brutus. He wasn't at his post. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Something was wrong. Brutus. She called out, her voice trembling. Silence. Then she heard a sound coming from the service entrance near the kitchen. A heavy, metallic clank followed by raised voices. One of the voices was male, rough and angry. The other was Candace. Are you sure this will work? Candace was whispering, but the sound carried in the silent apartment. Relax, princess, the man said. Albright paid off the doorman. The cameras are down. The big ape is knocked out in the service elevator. It's just us and the girl. Maya's blood ran cold. Brutus, knocked out. Just grab her and let's go, Candace hissed. Before someone notices, remember the deal. You get the girl, I get the penthouse back. No one gets hurt, right? The man laughed, a nasty, grating sound. Sure, princess, whatever you say. Maya recognized that laugh. It was a sound from her nightmares. It was Samir, her husband. Candace had brought him here. She had betrayed her to the man who had destroyed her life. Panic exploded in Maya's chest. She couldn't let him find her. Not here, not alone. She turned and ran as fast as her pregnant body would allow back toward the east wing. She needed to hide. She needed a weapon. She needed Victor, but Victor was halfway around the world. She burst into her room and slammed the heavy mahogany door, locking it with trembling fingers. It wouldn't hold them for long. She heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Maya, darling, where are you? Candace called out, her voice sing-song and terrifying. Husband is here to see you. Isn't that a nice surprise? Come on out, babe, Samir's voice boomed, closer now. Let's go home, we have a lot to talk about. Maya backed away from the door, her eyes scanning the room frantically. There was nowhere to go. The only way out was the floor-to-ceiling window 40 stories up. She was trapped. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a side table, holding it like a club. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. The baby kicked violently, sensing her terror. The doorknob rattled, then a heavy shoulder slammed against the wood. Open up, Maya, Samir shouted. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Maya gripped the vase tighter, knuckles white. She wouldn't go back with him. She would fight. She would die first. Another slam. The wood splintered around the lock. One more hit, and they would be in. The wood splintered with a deafening crack. The lock gave way, and the heavy mahogany door burst open, slamming against the wall. Maya screamed, backing away until her spine hit the cold glass of the window. Samir stood in the doorway. He looked exactly as she remembered, sweaty, manic, his eyes bloodshot with a mixture of drugs and desperation. He was wearing a cheap leather jacket that smelled of stale cigarettes. Candace stood behind him, looking pale but determined. Hurry up, Samir, grab her and let's go before the ape wakes up. Samir stepped into the room, a twisted smile spreading across his face. There she is. My little runaway, living the high life, huh, Maya, while I'm dodging loan sharks in Queens. Get out, Maya warned, holding the heavy crystal vase like a baseball bat. Her voice was shaking, but her grip was tight. Stay away from me, Samir laughed. Or what, you gonna hit me with a flower pot? Come on, babe, don't make a scene, we're just going for a little ride. He lunged for her. Maya didn't think. She reacted on pure adrenaline and terror. She swung the heavy vase with all her might. It connected with a sickening thud against Samir's outstretched forearm. He howled in pain, stumbling back, clutching his arm. You bitch, you broke my arm. The vase shattered in Maya's hands, glass spraying across the marble floor. She was left holding the jagged neck of the vase, a makeshift weapon. Candace shrieked from the doorway. You idiot, just grab her. Enraged by the pain, Samir charged again, ignoring the glass. He grabbed Maya by her hair, yanking her head back. She screamed, dropping the broken glass as she clawed at his hands. You think you're too good for me now, Samir hissed into her ear, his breath foul. You think this rich guy actually cares about you? He's just using you just like I did. He dragged her toward the door. Maya fought viciously, kicking, scratching, using all her weight to resist. But she was 8 months pregnant and exhausted with fear. Samir was fueled by rage and adrenaline. He hauled her out into the hallway, past a pale-faced Candace. Service elevator, Candace urged, pointing. Down the hall, past the kitchen. They dragged her through the beautiful, silent penthouse. Maya's heels scraped against the marble floors she had been afraid to walk on just days ago. Pain shot through her abdomen, a sharp, tightening cramp that was different from the baby kicking. Contractions. The stress was inducing labor. Please, Samir, the baby, she begged, gasping for air. You're hurting the baby. Shut up, he roared, shoving her forward. They reached the living room. The service hallway was just ahead. Freedom for them, a nightmare for her. Suddenly, the ding of the main private elevator echoed through the apartment. Everyone froze. Candace looked at the elevator doors in horror. Victor, no, he's in Tokyo, it can't be him. The doors slid open. It wasn't Victor. 4 men in tactical black gear, wearing body armor and carrying assault rifles, burst into the room. They moved with military precision, silent and terrifyingly fast. These were not regular security guards. This was Victor Sterling's elite response team, ex-Special Forces mercenaries he kept on retainer for extreme threats. Freeze, get on the ground, now, the lead officer bellowed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Candace screamed and dropped to her knees, covering her head. Don't shoot, I'm his fiancé, I live here. Samir, panic-stricken, tried to use Maya as a shield, pulling her in front of him. Back off, I'll hurt her, I swear to God. The lead officer didn't even blink. He raised his rifle. A red laser dot appeared center mass on Samir's forehead, just inches above Maya's shoulder. Let her go, the officer said, his tone flat and deadly, or you die right here in this living room. The threat was absolute. Samir knew it. He was a low-level conman, not a killer. He shoved Maya away violently. She fell hard onto the plush rug, crying out as another agonizing contraction ripped through her body. Before Samir could even raise his hands in surrender, 2 of the tactical officers were on him. They tackled him to the marble floor with bone-crunching force. Zip ties were cinched tight around his wrists before he even stopped bouncing. Candace was sobbing hysterically on the floor. He forced me, it was all his idea, I tried to stop him. Another officer hauled her to her feet, ignoring her lies, and Zip tied her wrists behind her back. The lead officer knelt beside Maya. Ma'am, are you injured? Maya couldn't speak. She was curled on her side, clutching her belly. The pain was intense, coming in waves now. She looked down. Her beautiful new gray sweatpants were stained dark with fluid, her water had broken. The baby, she gasped, clutching the officer's tactical vest. The baby is coming. The officer tapped his radio headset. Control, this is Alpha Team. Target secured. 2 hostiles in custody. We need medical evac immediately. The principal is in labor. Repeat, principal is in labor. Situation critical. Victor Sterling was pacing the aisle of his Gulfstream G650 jet like a caged tiger. The plane was flying at maximum velocity toward New York, but it wasn't fast enough. His satellite phone rang. He snatched it up. Report, Victor barked. It was his head of global security in New York. Sir, the team breached the penthouse. The threat has been neutralized. Victor stopped pacing, leaning against a bulkhead, his knuckles white. Maya, is she safe? There was a hesitation on the other end, a hesitation that made Victor's blood freeze. Sir, Ms. Sharma is alive, but the trauma of the assault, she's gone into active labor. The paramedics are transporting her to Mount Sinai Hospital right now. They're concerned about fetal distress. Victor closed his eyes. He felt a wave of nausea. He had failed. The one thing he swore to do, protect the daughter of the woman who saved him, he had failed to do. Who was it? Victor asked, his voice so low it was barely audible over the hum of the jet engines. 2 individuals were apprehended on site, sir. One male, identified as Samir Sharma. The other, say it. The other is Ms. Candace van der Woodson. Victor opened his eyes. The ice was gone. In its place was a fire of pure, unadulterated rage that would burn down everything in its path. Hold them, Victor commanded. Do not turn them over to the police yet. Take them to a secure location. I want to deal with them myself when I land. Understood, sir. And Ms. Sharma, tell the hospital that if anything happens to her or that baby, I will buy that hospital and burn it to the ground with the board of directors inside. Spare no expense. Get the best specialists in the world. Now. He hung up the phone and stared out the window at the endless black ocean below. He was hours away. Maya was alone, terrified, and giving birth to a baby that might be in danger because of the snakes he had allowed into his home. Victor Sterling had spent his life believing that money could solve anything, that emotions were a liability. Today, he realized he was wrong. Money couldn't buy back the last 2 hours. And the emotions he was feeling right now, fear, guilt, and a murderous need for vengeance, were the only things that felt real. He sat down, staring at the photo of Maya's mother he kept in his wallet. Hang on, Maya, he whispered to the empty cabin. Just hang on, I'm coming. The world had dissolved into a terrifying blur of fluorescent lights, shouting voices, and agony that felt like it was tearing her body in half. Maya lay on a gurney, being rushed through the sterile white corridors of Mount Sinai Hospital. Everything was happening too fast. She couldn't catch her breath. The contractions were no longer waves. They were a continuous, crushing vice around her midsection. Fetal heart rate is decelerating, down to 90, someone shouted. She's hemorrhaging. Get 2 units of O negative on standby. Maya tried to focus on the faces hovering above her, doctors in blue scrubs, nurses with worried eyes behind surgical masks. They were speaking a language she didn't understand, a language of emergency and life or death. Please, she gasped, grabbing the sleeve of a nurse running alongside the gurney. My baby, is my baby okay? The nurse pressed a cool hand to Maya's clammy forehead. We're doing everything we can, honey. Just hang on, you need to stay with us. They burst through a set of double doors into an operating room. The air was freezing cold. The sheer number of people, anesthesiologists, surgeons, pediatric specialists, told Maya how bad things were. She felt a mask being pressed over her nose and mouth. A chemical smell. We have to put you under, Maya, a doctor said urgently, leaning over her. We need to get the baby out now. It's an emergency C-section. Panic flared. No, I want to be awake. I need to see him. There's no time for a spinal block. Your placenta has detached because of the trauma. You're bleeding internally and the baby is losing oxygen. We have minutes. Minutes. Tears leaked from the corners of Maya's eyes, sliding into her hair. She was alone. After everything, after surviving the streets, after the false safety of the penthouse, after the attack, she was going to do this alone, surrounded by strangers. As the anesthesia began to pull her under, the room spinning into darkness, her mind grasped for one thing, one name that represented safety, even if she didn't understand why. Victor, she whispered into the mask, the name barely a breath. Then, darkness. The wheels of the Gulf Stream touched down with a screech of burning rubber. The jet hadn't even fully stopped taxiing before the stairs were lowering. Victor Sterling was standing by the door, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. He looked like a man who had just aged 10 years in a 4-hour flight. He didn't wait for the customs agents. He sprinted down the stairs to the tarmac, where a black armored SUV was waiting, engine running, lights flashing. Brutus was at the wheel. His face was bruised, a nasty gash over his left eye where Samir had blindsided him with a crowbar during the penthouse breach. Mount Sinai, Victor said, sliding into the back seat. Drive like you don't care if we live or die. Brutus nodded grimly and slammed the accelerator. The heavy SUV surged forward, tires screaming as it tore out of the private airport gates, sirens blaring, cutting across traffic onto the highway toward Manhattan. Victor was on the phone again. This time with Dr. Eris Thorne, the chief of surgery at Mount Sinai, whom Victor had personally pulled out of a board meeting 15 minutes ago. "Talk to me, Eris," Victor demanded, gripping the phone so tight his knuckles turned white. "Victor, I'm not going to lie to you. It's critical." Dr. Thorne's voice was steady but grave. "She suffered a placental abruption due to physical trauma and extreme stress. She's lost a lot of blood. We're operating now to get the infant out, but the fetal distress signals were very strong before she went under." "Save them," Victor whispered. It wasn't a command anymore. It was a plea. A desperate plea from the richest man in the city to the forces of biology that his money couldn't control. "Eris, if you need anything, equipment, specialists from Europe, anything, you spend it. I don't care if it costs $1 billion. You save that mother and you save that child." "We are doing everything humanly possible, Victor. I'm heading into the OR now to oversee it myself. Get here as fast as you can." The line went dead. Victor stared at the phone. For the first time in his adult life, he felt completely, utterly powerless. He could buy companies, crash economies, and shape the skyline of the city, but he couldn't stop a hemorrhage. He couldn't force a baby's lungs to breathe. He looked out the window as the SUV swerved through traffic, the Manhattan skyline looming ahead, the city he owned. And somewhere in that concrete jungle, in a windowless holding room in one of his warehouses in Queens, Candace and Samir were zip-tied to chairs waiting for him. A cold, dark fury settled over Victor, replacing the panic. The Iceman was back, but this time he was burning. "Brutus," Victor said, his voice deadly calm. "Sir. When we drop me at the hospital, you go to the holding site. Make sure our guests are comfortable. Tell them I'll be there soon." Brutus met Victor's eyes in the rearview mirror. The big bodyguard nodded slowly. He knew that look. It was the look Victor got right before he destroyed a competitor, only this was infinitely more personal. "Understood, sir." The symphony of the ore was chaotic and intense. Monitors beeped rapidly, suction tubes hissed, and metal instruments clattered onto trays. "BP is dropping, 80/50. Hang another unit of blood." "I can't see the bleeder, more suction." Dr. Thorne moved with practiced urgency. He made the final incision. "Okay, I'm through, get ready." He reached into the abdominal cavity. It was a mess of blood and tissue. He worked quickly, guided by decades of experience. His hands found the infant. He pulled. A tiny, limp form was lifted from Maya's body. A baby boy. The room held its breath. There was no cry. Baby was pale, almost blue. He wasn't moving. No respiration. Heart rate is practically non-existent, the pediatrician barked, taking the baby immediately to the warming table in the corner. "Start resuscitation, bag him, get me epinephrine pediatric dose now." The team split. Half focused on Maya, who was trying to bleed out on the table. The other half focused on the tiny, silent boy in the corner. Chest compressions began on a chest the size of a teacup. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. "Come on, little fighter," Dr. Thorne whispered, looking over his shoulder while trying to clamp a severed artery in Maya's uterus. "Your mother fought too hard for you to quit now." Silence from the corner, just the rhythmic whoosh of the ambu bag forcing air into tiny lungs that refused to inflate. Seconds ticked by. 30 seconds, a minute, it was an eternity. Then a gasp, a wet, shuddering cough. And then a thin, weak wail pierced the sterile air. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. "We have a heartbeat, rates rising, respiration established, but it's labored. He's very premature, lungs are underdeveloped. We need to get him to the NICU immediately, put him on a ventilator." They whisked the baby away in a transport incubator, a team of specialists running alongside. Dr. Thorne turned his full attention back to Maya. "Okay, the baby's fighting. Now let's save the mother. Pressure's still falling. Need to stop this bleeding or she's going to code on the table." In the waiting room, 4:30 p.m. Victor burst through the doors of the private family waiting area near surgery. He looked wild, hair mussed, shirt stained with sweat, eyes wide with terror. The room was empty except for a lone nurse at the desk. "Maya Sharma," Victor demanded, gasping for air. "Where is she?" The nurse looked up, startled. She recognized him immediately. Everyone knew Victor Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, please calm down. Dr. Thorne is still in surgery with Ms. Sharma." "Is she alive?" The words felt like stones in his mouth. "She is, but it's very serious, sir. They are working very hard." Victor staggered back, hitting the wall and sliding down into a chair. He put his head in his hands. "And the baby?" he asked into his palms. The nurse hesitated. "The baby was delivered. A boy. He was revived, but he's very critical. They took him to the neonatal intensive care unit upstairs. He's on life support." Victor let out a shaky breath. Alive, both alive, for now. He sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the generic art on the wall, his mind replaying every mistake he had made. He shouldn't have gone to Tokyo. He shouldn't have trusted the security system. He should have told Maya the truth sooner. The door opened. Victor shot to his feet. Dr. Thorne walked in. He was still in his surgical scrubs, a cap covering his hair, a mask pulled down around his neck. He looked exhausted. There were splashes of dark blood on his green scrubs. Victor couldn't speak. He just looked at the doctor, desperate for the verdict. Dr. Thorne walked over and put a hand on Victor's shoulder, a gesture of human connection Victor usually flinched away from, but now he leaned into it. "Victor," Dr. Thorne said softly, "she made it." Victor's knees buckled. He gripped the doctor's arm to stay upright. "We managed to stop the bleeding," Thorne continued. "She lost a tremendous amount of blood, and her body has been through significant trauma. She's in the ICU now, medically induced coma to let her heal. It's going to be a long road, and the next 24 hours are critical, but she is stable." "Can I see her?" "Not yet. Let her rest. She needs quiet." Victor nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "The boy," Thorne sighed. "He's a fighter. He was born not breathing, but they got him back. He's very small, about 4 pounds. His lungs aren't fully developed. He's on a ventilator in the NICU. He has a long fight ahead of him too, but he's here. He's here." Victor closed his eyes, a tear leaking out and tracking through the sweat on his face. "Thank you, Eris," Victor whispered. "Thank you. Go home, Victor, get cleaned up. There's nothing you can do here tonight." Victor straightened up. The relief was already beginning to harden back into resolve. "No," Victor said, his voice returning to its usual steel, but colder now, sharper. "I have something I need to do, someone I need to visit." He turned and walked out of the waiting room. He wasn't going to the penthouse. He was going to Queens. It was time to balance the books. This part centers on Victor's calculated dismantling of the people who hurt Maya. It's a shift from the medical drama back to the high-stakes thriller tone, showcasing the terrifying extent of Victor's power when unleashed. The warehouse was located in an industrial wasteland in Long Island City, Queens, nestled between a defunct scavenging yard and the murky waters of Newton Creek. It was a place that didn't exist on most maps, a gray smudge of corrugated metal and concrete used by Sterling Global for off-book storage. It was bitter cold inside, the air smelling of diesel fumes and damp cement. A single, high-wattage industrial lamp hung from the ceiling, casting a harsh pool of light in the center of the vast, empty space. In that pool of light sat 2 metal chairs bolted to the floor. Candace Van Der Woodson was zip-tied to one. Her Chanel suit was ruined, torn at the shoulder, and stained with grime from the floor where the tactical team had tackled her. Her flawless makeup was streaked with mascara tears. She was shivering violently, partially from the cold, but mostly from terror. Samir Sharma was zip-tied to the other. He looked considerably worse. His nose was broken, splattered with dried blood, a souvenir from hitting the marble floor of the penthouse face first. He was sweating despite the cold, his eyes darting around the shadows, looking for a way out that didn't exist. Brutus stood in the shadows, arms crossed, a silent stone gargoyle watching over them. "You can't do this." Candace hissed, her voice shrill with panic. "Do you know who my father is? This is kidnapping. When Victor finds out what you brutes did to me, he'll have you all fired, jailed," Samir groaned. "Shut up, lady, just shut up. You don't get it, do you? They aren't doing this behind his back. They're doing it because he told them to." Candace paled. "No, Victor wouldn't. We're engaged. It was just a misunderstanding. I was trying to get that squatter out of his house." The sound of a heavy metal rolling door opening cut through the air. It was a slow, grinding mechanical screech that made both prisoners jump. A black SUV drove slowly into the warehouse, its headlights blinding them for a moment before cutting out. The car door opened. Victor Sterling stepped out. He had changed out of the sweat-stained shirt from the hospital. He was now wearing a pristine black suit, a black shirt, and a black tie. He looked like an executioner dressed for a funeral. "Rush." He walked slowly toward the circle of light, the hard soles of his shoes echoing on the concrete floor. He stopped 10 feet away from them, standing just outside the direct light, his face half in shadow. The silence stretched. It was heavier, more suffocating than any shouting could have been. "Victor!" Candace cried out, the relief palpable in her voice. "Oh my God, Victor, thank God. Tell these animals to untie me. That crazy man broke in, he forced me to help him. I was a hostage." Samir stared at Victor, his street hustler bravado evaporating instantly in the face of real, untouchable power. He'd seen guys like Victor on TV, but being in a room with one, feeling the sheer weight of his presence, was terrifying. Victor ignored Candace. His ice-blue eyes were fixed on Samir. "You touched her," Victor said. His voice was so low it was barely a whisper, yet it carried to the furthest corners of the warehouse. Samir swallowed hard. "Look, man, it's a misunderstanding. She's my wife. We were just having a domestic dispute. You can't keep a man from his wife." "She is not your wife," Victor said, taking a slow step forward into the light. "She is my family." The word hung in the air. Family. Candace gaped. "Family? Victor, have you lost your mind? She's a pregnant hobo you picked up off the street a week ago. I am your fiancé. I am the one bringing the Van der Woodsen connections to the merger." Victor finally turned his gaze to Candace. It was a look so devoid of human warmth it made her blood freeze. "Brutus," Victor said calmly, "cut her loose." Candace let out a sob of relief. "See, I told you, untie me this instant." Brutus stepped forward and sliced the zip ties with a combat knife. Candace rubbed her wrists, glaring at the bodyguard, then stood up, trying to regain her composure. "Victor, darling, we need to talk," she began, smoothing her ruined skirt. "This entire situation has gotten out of hand. We need to spin this with the press before." "You misunderstood," Victor interrupted softly. "I didn't have you untied because you're leaving. I had you untied because I want you to make a phone call." He reached into his pocket and pulled out her smartphone, which had been confiscated by the tactical team. He held it out to her. Candace took it, confused. "A call to who? My lawyers. To your father." Candace frowned. "Daddy, why?" "Because you need to tell him that the merger is off. That the engagement is off. And that the $50 million bridge loan my firm provided to keep his shipping company solvent is being called in tomorrow morning." Candace dropped the phone. It clattered on the concrete. "What?" she whispered, horror dawning on her. "Victor, no, you can't. That loan. If you call it in now, Daddy will be bankrupt. We'll lose everything. The Hamptons house, the company, everything." "Yes," Victor said simply, "you will." "But why?" "Because of her." "Victor, please, be rational. Think about the scandal." Victor pulled out his own phone. He tapped the screen a few times and held it up. It was playing a video. It was the security footage from the penthouse hallway, captured by a hidden backup camera that hadn't been disabled. The video showed Candace standing by as Samir dragged a screaming, pregnant Maya by her hair across the marble floor. Candace wasn't horrified. She was urging him to hurry up. Candace stared at the screen, her face draining of blood. "My PR team already has this," Victor said, along with statements from Mrs. Albright, who, when faced with unemployment and a potential accessory charge, was very eager to tell the truth about your little conspiracy. He put the phone away. "If you do not make that call to your father right now, this video goes to TMZ, the New York Post, and every other outlet in the city within 10 minutes. You won't just be bankrupt, Candace. You will be a social pariah. You will be the woman who helped a violent junkie assault a pregnant woman." Candace began to hyperventilate. Her entire world, her status, her money, her reputation was dissolving in front of her eyes. Victor wasn't yelling. He wasn't even angry. He was just deleting her existence like a bad line of code. Shaking uncontrollably, she picked up her phone and dialed. She sobbed into the receiver as she destroyed her family's legacy on Victor's command. When she was done, she collapsed back into the chair, weeping silently. Victor didn't even look at her. He turned back to Samir. Samir was trembling now. He had just watched Victor casually annihilate one of the richest socialites in New York without lifting a finger. "Look, Mr. Sterling," Samir stammered, blood dripping from his broken nose. "I get it. You want me gone. I'll go. I'll leave town. You'll never see me again. Just let me go." Victor walked closer until he was standing right over Samir. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with the metallic scent of the warehouse. "You broke into my home," Victor said quietly. "You assaulted a woman under my protection. You nearly killed my godson before he took his first breath. I didn't mean to hurt the baby. I just wanted the money. I owe people, bad people." "I know," Victor interrupted. "I bought your debt." Samir blinked, confused. What? Ivan Vanko. Russian loan shark in Brighton Beach you owe $80,000 to. I bought the debt this afternoon. You owe me now. Samir looked terrified. Vanko broke legs. Victor Sterling. He didn't know what Victor Sterling did. I can pay you back, I swear, just give me time. I don't want your money, you pathetic little worm. Victor leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You like to gamble, Samir. You like to take risks. Today, you bet everything on red, and it came up black. You assaulted Maya in the first degree. Burglary, kidnapping, reckless endangerment of a minor. My lawyers are already talking to the district attorney. Victor straightened up, smoothing his cuffs. You aren't going to a county jail, Samir. You're going to Attica, maximum security, based on the charges and the high-priced legal team ensuring they stick. You're looking at 25 years to life. Samir began to cry, ugly, sniffling sobs. No, please, 25 years. My life will be over. Your life was over the moment you put your hands on her, Victor said coldly. He turned to Brutus. The police are waiting outside the gate. Hand him over. Make sure the transfer team knows he's a flight risk and has a history of violence against women. I want him in solitary before morning. Brutus nodded, hauling a sobbing, pleading Samir out of the chair. Victor turned back to Candace, who was slumped in her chair, a broken doll. Get out of my sight, Victor said. If I ever see you again, if you ever speak Maya's name, I release the video. Candace scrambled up and ran for the exit door, stumbling into the night, her life in ruins. Victor stood alone in the center of the warehouse under the harsh light. He took a deep, shuddering breath. The rage hadn't entirely dissipated, but the cold, hard satisfaction of justice had taken its place. He had cleaned house. He had removed the threats. He pulled out his phone and looked at the time. It was nearly dawn. He needed to get back to the hospital. He needed to be there when Maya woke up. He needed to tell her the truth. He walked out of the warehouse into the cold morning air. The Iceman had done his job. Now, for the first time in 30 years, Victor Sterling had to figure out how to be just a man. The sun was fully up by the time Victor returned to Mount Sinai Hospital. The morning light was harsh and unforgiving, exposing the exhaustion etched into the faces of the night staff going off shift. Victor felt like a ghost haunting the corridors. He had shed the persona of the vengeful billionaire back in that Queen's warehouse. What was left was a man consumed by a terrifying, unfamiliar dread. He had destroyed his enemies, secured his perimeter, but none of that power mattered inside these sterile walls. Here, currency was measured in heartbeats and oxygen saturation levels. He found Dr. Thorne near the surgical ICU. The doctor looked equally exhausted, clutching a lukewarm coffee cup. Victor, Thorne said, surprised to see him back so soon and looking so disheveled. I thought I told you to go home. Where is she, Eris? Victor's voice was gravelly. Thorne sighed, realizing arguing was pointless. She's in SICU Bay 4. She's still under sedation, Victor. It's not pretty. I need to see her and the boy. Okay, ICU first. Then I'll take you up to the NICU, but Victor, prepare yourself. Thorne led him through a set of swinging doors into the hush of the intensive care unit. The air was colder here, smelling fiercely of antiseptic. The only sounds were the rhythmic whooshing of ventilators and the steady beeping of cardiac monitors. They stopped outside a glass-walled room. Victor stopped dead. It took his brain a moment to reconcile the image before him with the vibrant, defiant woman who had challenged him in his penthouse just days ago. Maya was barely visible beneath a tangle of tubes and wires. A ventilator tube was taped to her mouth, breathing for her. Her skin was shockingly pale against the blue hospital sheets, almost translucent. Bags of blood and fluids hung on IV poles around her bed like strange, macabre ornaments. She looked small, broken. Victor felt a physical blow to his chest. He pressed a hand against the glass, leaving a smudge. The placental abruption was severe, Thorne explained quietly. She lost nearly half her blood volume before we could stop it. Her body went into shock. We're keeping her sedated to let her systems recover without stress. The next 24 hours will tell us if her kidneys and liver are going to bounce back. Victor couldn't take his eyes off her. He remembered the first night outside the restaurant, how she had shivered under his coat. He remembered her fierce protection of her unborn child against Samir. She fought like hell, Eris, Victor whispered. She fought the whole time. She did, and she's still fighting, but right now she needs rest more than anything. Victor nodded slowly. He felt a crushing weight of guilt. He had brought her into his world thinking his money and power could shield her. Instead, his world had almost killed her. Candace was his mistake. The lax security was his mistake. "I want a guard outside this door 24/7, Victor said, his voice regaining some of its usual steel. "No one comes in but you and the primary nurses. No one." "Already done, Victor," Brutus called ahead. Victor stayed at the window for another 10 minutes, just watching the rise and fall of her chest assisted by the machine. He needed to imprint the image in his mind, a brutal reminder of the cost of his arrogance. "Take me to the boy," Victor said finally, turning away from the glass. If the adult ICU was quiet, the NICU was silent almost to the point of reverence. The lights were dimmed to mimic the womb. It was a world of miniatures, tiny diapers, tiny blood pressure cuffs, tiny lives hanging in the balance. Thorne led him to an incubator in the corner. It looked like a high-tech spacecraft designed for a very small astronaut. Victor looked inside and felt his breath catch in his throat. He was so small, inconceivably small. The baby boy lay naked except for a diaper that looked massive on his frame. His skin was thin, reddish, and covered in fine downy hair. Wires were taped to his chest, and a tube smaller than a soda straw went down his throat, connected to a ventilator that puffed quick, shallow breaths into his undeveloped lungs. He was 4 pounds of raw vulnerability. "He's 35 weeks, Thorne said softly. "But the stress of the last few months, the malnutrition before you found her, he's undersized. His lungs are the biggest worry. They aren't producing enough surfactant to stay open on their own." Victor stared at the tiny hands, curled into fists the size of grapes. He remembered Samir, that violent brute, dragging Maya around while this fragile life was inside her. The rage flared again, hot and vicious, but it was quickly drowned out by an overwhelming sense of protectiveness. "Can he hear me?" Victor asked. "We believe they can. It's good for them to hear human voices. It helps bond them to the world outside the isolette." Victor hesitated. He was a man who crushed competitors and negotiated billion-dollar mergers. He didn't know how to talk to a baby. He reached out and placed a hand gently on the plastic porthole of the incubator. "Hey there," Victor whispered, feeling ridiculous and terrified all at once. "You had a rough start, didn't you, little man?" The baby didn't move, just continued its mechanical breathing. "Your mom is tough," Victor continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The toughest person I know. You get that from her. You have to fight, okay? You have to hold on, because I promised her you'd be safe and I don't break my promises." He looked at the name card taped to the incubator. It read, "Baby Boy Sharma." It looked wrong. Sharma was the name of the man who had abandoned them, the man who had almost killed them. Victor straightened up. "Eris." "Yes, Victor. He needs a name. He can't just be Baby Boy." "Well, Maya isn't awake to name him yet." Victor looked down at the child. He remembered the photo in his wallet. Sarah, the woman who gave him meatloaf when he was starving. "Leo," Victor said suddenly. It wasn't a family name. It just came to him. Lion strong. "Leo," Thorne repeated. "It's a good name. Put it on his chart, Leo, until his mother says otherwise." Victor stayed for an hour, just watching the monitors flicker above the plastic box that held the smallest, most important thing in his world. He realized with a jolt that he would trade every dollar in his bank account right now, just to see that baby breathe on his own for 1 minute. 3 days later, Victor moved into Maya's ICU room. He refused to leave. He had a cot brought in and placed in the corner. He set up a laptop on a rolling tray table and ran Sterling Global from the bedside of a comatose woman. He slept in fits and starts, waking up at every change in the rhythm of her ventilator. He learned to read the monitors, watching her blood pressure and oxygen levels with the same obsessive focus he usually reserved for stock tickers. Brutus, his face still bruised but healing, stood guard outside the door in 12-hour shifts, alternating with another trusted man from Victor's security team. Mrs. Albright came once, bringing fresh clothes for Victor. She looked pale and shaken, having narrowly avoided prison time thanks to Victor's calculated mercy. She brought flowers for Maya, placing them guiltily on the windowsill before fleeing the intense atmosphere of the room. Victor spent hours just watching Maya. The swelling in her face had gone down, revealing the sharp bone structure that mirrored her mother's. He talked to her sometimes when the nurses weren't around. "I handled it, Maya," he told her sleeping form on the second night. "Samir is gone. He's in a holding facility upstate waiting for trial. The DA is throwing the book at him. He'll never hurt you again. And Candace is finished. Her family is ruined, they paid the price. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he needed to say it. He needed her to know on some level that he had fixed the immediate threats. But the biggest threat was still the silence in the room. On the morning of the 4th day, Dr. Thorne came in. Her vitals are strong, Victor. Her kidney function is almost back to normal. We're going to lower the sedation today. See if she wakes up on her own. Victor closed his laptop. He pulled a chair right up to the bed and took Maya's limp hand in his. It was cool, but no longer the icy cold of the street. "Come back, Maya," he whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "Come back to us." He sat there for 4 hours as the drugs slowly cleared her system. At 2:15 p.m., he felt a twitch. His heart leaped into his throat. He looked at her face. Her eyelids fluttered. Once. Twice. Then they opened weakly. Amber eyes were foggy, unfocused. They darted around the room, taking in the ceiling tiles, the unfamiliar equipment, the tube in her mouth. Panic instantly flooded her gaze. She tried to sit up, but she was too weak, and the restraints on her wrists held her down. She started to gag on the ventilator tube. "Easy, Maya, easy." Victor was up instantly, leaning over her. "You're in the hospital. You're safe. Don't fight the tube." He pressed the call button frantically. Maya's eyes focused on him. Recognition dawned, followed immediately by terror. Her free hand flew to her stomach. It was flat. Her eyes went wide, wild with fear. She tried to scream around the tube, a horrible, choked sound. "Where's my baby?" The question was screaming in her eyes. "He's okay," Victor said quickly, gripping her shoulders gently to keep her from thrashing. "Maya, look at me. The baby is okay. He's alive." She stopped fighting, staring at him, begging him with her eyes to be telling the truth. Dr. Thorne and 2 nurses rushed in. "She's awake. She's fighting the vent," a nurse called out. "Okay, let's get this tube out," Thorne said. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. They suctioned her throat and pulled the long tube out. Maya collapsed back against the pillows, coughing violently, her throat raw. A nurse put an oxygen mask over her face. Maya pushed it away weakly. "My baby," she rasped, her voice barely a croak. "Where?" "He's upstairs in the NICU," Victor said, taking her hand again. "He was born early, Maya. He's small and he needs help breathing right now, but he's fighting. Dr. Thorne says he's stable." Tears leaked from Maya's eyes. I don't remember. Samir, he was." "Samir is in jail," Victor said firmly. "He can never come near you again. It's over, Maya. You're safe. The baby is safe." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since waking up. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the rumpled clothes, the shadow of a beard on the usually immaculate Iceman. She realized he was holding her hand, his grip tight, desperate. You were here," she whispered. "I haven't left," Victor said. Maya closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. The nightmare in the penthouse felt like it belonged to someone else. The reality was pain, weakness, but also, Victor. "I want to see him," she said, opening her eyes again. "My son, I need to see him." "You will," Victor promised. "As soon as you're strong enough to move from this bed, I'll take you to him." What did you name him?" she asked, her voice fading as sleep tugged at her again. Victor hesitated. I called him Leo, just for now on his chart. You can change it." A faint smile touched Maya's lips. "Leo," she whispered. "My little lion." Her eyes drifted closed. The sedative hadn't fully worn off, and the effort of waking had exhausted her. Victor watched her sleep, listening to the steady, unassisted rhythm of her breathing. He felt a tension leave his shoulders that he hadn't realized he was carrying for 4 days. She was back. Now came the hard part. Now he had to tell her the truth about why he had saved her, and why her life was about to change forever. But for now, he just held her hand and watched the monitor beep, grateful for every single line that flashed across the screen. It took another 24 hours before Dr. Thorne deemed Maya stable enough to leave the ICU. The physical recovery was brutal. Her body felt like a battlefield that had lost the war. Every breath was a chore. Every movement sent sharp flares of pain from her C-section incision. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the agonizing ache in her chest to see her son. Victor had arranged for a private luxury suite on the maternity floor, a room that looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital, complete with mahogany furniture and a view of the East River. But Maya barely noticed the opulence. "Take me to him," she demanded the moment they settled her into the new bed. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by a mother's desperate adrenaline. "You need to rest, Maya. Victor said gently, adjusting her pillows. He looked better today, having finally showered and changed into a fresh suit brought by a subdued Mrs. Albright, but the shadow of worry still clung to his eyes. I rested for 4 days, Maya snapped, swinging her legs over the side of the bed, wincing hard as her abdominal muscles protested. I am going to see my son. Either you take me or I crawl there. Victor knew that look in her eyes. It was the same defiance he'd seen in the alley. There was no arguing with it. He called for a nurse to bring a wheelchair. The trip up to the NICU felt like a pilgrimage. Victor pushed the chair himself, navigating the hallways with a fierce, protective intensity, glaring at anyone who walked too close or spoke too loudly near her. They stopped outside the NICU doors. You had to scrub in like a surgeon to enter, a thorough washing of hands and arms up to the elbows, gowning up over their clothes. Victor helped Maya, his movements surprisingly gentle as he tied the back of her yellow isolation gown. Ready? He asked. Maya took a shaky breath and nodded. They wheeled inside. The hushed atmosphere hit Maya first. The beeping, the soft whooshing of ventilators, the dimmed lights. It felt sacred and terrifying. They approached the isolate in the corner. Baby boy Sharma. Maya wheeled herself the last few feet. She looked through the clear plastic wall. A strangled sob ripped from her throat, and she covered her mouth with her hand. No amount of description from Victor could have prepared her for the reality of how small Leo was. He looked impossibly fragile, like a baby bird that had fallen from a nest too soon. The ventilator tube taped to his tiny face seemed enormous. Wires snake out from under his diaper. His ribcage fluttered rapidly, with the mechanics of the machine breathing for him. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks, soaking the paper mask she had to wear. He's so little, Victor, he's too little." "He's strong," Victor said, standing behind her chair, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Thorne said his color is better today. His vitals are holding steady." Guilt crashed over Maya like a tidal wave. This was her fault. If she hadn't been so weak, if she hadn't let Samir find her, if she had just been stronger. "I'm so sorry, little one," she cried, pressing her forehead against the cool plastic. "Mama's so sorry, I should have protected you better." A nurse approached softly. "It's okay to touch him, Mom. He knows you're here. He needs your touch." She opened 2 small portholes on the side of the incubator. Maya hesitated. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. What if she hurt him? What if her touch was too rough for skin that looked like delicate parchment? "Go on," Victor whispered close to her ear. Maya reached in. The air inside the incubator was warm and humid. She slowly laid her hand over Leo's chest. Her palm covered his entire torso. Beneath the thin skin, she felt it. A rapid, thrumming vibration. His heartbeat. Fast, urgent, and alive. Leo stirred at her touch. His tiny, stick-like legs kicked out weakly. One minuscule hand, fingers the size of matchsticks, fluttered up and brushed against her thumb. Maya broke down completely. It was a guttural, wrenching cry of pure love and agony. This was her son. This tiny warrior fighting a battle he never should have had to fight. "I'm here," she sobbed to him. "I'm not going anywhere, Leo. I promise. You just keep fighting. Mama's got you." They stayed for 2 hours, until Maya was practically falling asleep in the wheelchair from exhaustion. Victor had to almost physically lift her back into the chair to take her back to her room. Back in the quiet luxury of her private room, the adrenaline faded, leaving Maya hollowed out. She lay against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, the image of Leo wired to machines burned into her retinas. Victor sat in an armchair by the window, watching the city lights come on. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with everything that hadn't been said. "He's going to make it," Victor said quietly into the silence. "How do you know?" Maya asked, her voice dull. "Because I won't allow any other outcome." It was said with the arrogance of a man who thought he could control the universe, but underneath, Maya heard the fear. She turned her head on the pillow to look at him. He looked tired, human. "Victor," she said. He turned to face her. "Why?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "Maya, you need to rest. No more deflections, no more secrets. You hated me when I walked up to you that night. You looked at me like I was trash. Then, something changed. In a second, everything changed." She pushed herself up slightly, wincing. "You took me in. You gave me your credit card. You fought Samir for me. You've spent the last 5 days sleeping in a chair next to my bed. Billionaires don't do that for random beggars. Tell me the truth. Who am I to you?" Victor stared at her. He knew this moment was coming. He had dreaded it. He was a man who dealt in secrets, in leverage. Giving up the truth felt like handing over a weapon. But looking at her now, seeing the strength in her eyes that mirrored the woman who saved him, he knew he owed her this too. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out an old, worn brown leather wallet. From the deepest fold, he extracted a photograph. It was a physical object that seemed out of place in his perfect, expensive world. It was creased, faded, the corners soft as felt from decades of being touched. He walked over to the bed and held it out to her. Maya took it with trembling fingers. It was a Polaroid from the late 80s. The colors were washed out, shifting toward orange and yellow. It showed a woman standing behind the counter of a diner, wearing a pink uniform with Betty's Place embroidered on the pocket. She was tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, but she was smiling a genuine, warm smile at the camera. Her eyes were large, almond-shaped and amber brown. Maya gasped, a sound of pure disbelief. Where did you get this?" She whispered, her thumb tracing the face of the woman. "This is my mother, Sarah. This was taken before she got sick." Victor sat on the edge of the bed. It was the closest he had ever physically been to her when not in a crisis. 30 years ago, Victor began, his voice low, looking at his hands. "I was 15. I had run away from a foster home in Chicago that was bad. I had been on the streets for 3 weeks. It was winter, worse than the night I met you." Maya stared at him, unable to reconcile the master of the universe sitting before her with a starving teenage runaway. "I hadn't eaten in 3 days, Victor continued. "I was huddled in the doorway of that diner, Betty's Place, trying to stay out of the wind. I was done, Maya. I had decided that if I didn't freeze to death that night, I was going to find a bridge in the morning and end it." He looked up, meeting her eyes. Then the door opened. It was her, your mother. Her shift was over. "She saw me. I expected her to yell, to call the cops. Everyone else did." Victor swallowed hard, the memory still sharp enough to cut. "She didn't say a word. She grabbed my arm and pulled me inside. The owner was gone. She sat me down in a back booth. She went to the kitchen and came back with a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. The biggest plate of food I'd ever seen. It was her dinner, the meal they gave her for her shift." Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she looked at the photo of her mother, the mother she remembered as sick and frail, now young and vibrant in this story. "I ate it like an animal," Victor said with a humorless smile. "When I was done, she gave me $20. She told me it was her tips for the night, and she said," his voice cracked. He had to stop and take a breath. "She looked me in the eye, just like you did outside that restaurant, and she said, 'Whatever they told you, kid, they lie, you matter. Don't let the bastards freeze you out.'" He looked at Maya, his blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "That meal, those words, they kept me alive one more day, and one day was enough for me to find a job washing dishes. That led to another job. I fought my way up from that moment. Every dollar I made, every deal I closed, it started with that plate of meatloaf." He reached out and gently touched the corner of the photo Maya was holding. "That night outside Le Bernardin. I didn't see a beggar, Maya. I saw her eyes looking back at me, the eyes of the only person who ever gave me something without wanting anything in return." Maya was openly crying now, the tears falling onto the hospital sheets. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together, the coat, the house, the protectiveness. "So," Maya whispered, her voice shaking, "it was all just paying a debt." "No," Victor said fiercely. "It started as a debt. I thought I could just throw money at you and balance the ledger. But then I got to know you. I saw you fight Candace with quiet dignity. I saw you defend your unborn child against a monster. You have her strength, Maya. You have her fire." He took her hand in his. His grip was firm, real. "I didn't save you, Maya. Your mother saved both of us, 30 years apart." The room fell silent, save for the soft weeping of the woman in the bed. Maya looked at the photo, then at the powerful man humbled beside her. Her whole life she had felt unlucky. Cursed. But she realized now that her mother's love had been a long-acting spell, casting a safety net across time, catching her when she finally fell too far. It wasn't charity, it was legacy. "Thank you for telling me," Maya whispered, squeezing his hand back. "Thank you for seeing her in me." Victor nodded, exhausted but unburdened. "Now you know, no more secrets." "No more secrets," she agreed. But as Victor looked at her, he knew there was one more secret, one he was still keeping from himself. The debt was paid. Logic dictated his obligation was over. Yet the thought of her and Leo leaving his life was now more terrifying than anything he had faced on the streets of Chicago. He had opened the fortress of his heart to let them in, and he had no idea how to close it again. The truth had changed everything. The air in Maya's private hospital suite, once thick with unspoken tension and power imbalance, was now clear. The transactional nature of their relationship, billionaire savior and desperate charity case, had evaporated, replaced by a complex, fragile bond forged in history and blood. Victor didn't leave. Even after Maya was moved out of the ICU and began regaining her strength, he remained a constant fixture. He traded his bespoke suits for cashmere sweaters and dark jeans, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man keeping a vigil. He ran his empire via secure video links from the corner of her room, muting the microphone to watch her sleep. But the real shift happened in the NICU. Every day, they went to see Leo. The tiny boy was proving to be a fighter, just as Victor had predicted. The ventilator tube was replaced by a smaller CPAP mask strapped to his nose, and then, finally, just a nasal cannula delivering a whisper of oxygen. The first time the nurses allowed Victor to hold him was a moment Maya would never forget. The Iceman of Wall Street, a man who moved billions with a phone call, looked utterly terrified as the nurse placed the 4-pound bundle into his arms. He held Leo as if he were made of nitroglycerin, his body rigid, his eyes wide. Leo squirmed, his tiny face scrunching up, and let out a squeaky cry. Victor instinctively rocked him, murmuring soft nonsense words. When Leo settled against Victor's chest, lulled by the deep thrum of his heartbeat, Victor looked up at Maya. His eyes, usually so cold, were unguarded, filled with a terrifying depth of emotion. "He's heavy," Victor whispered, though Leo weighed almost nothing. He meant the responsibility, the reality of this new life. Maya smiled, tired but genuine. "He likes you." For 2 weeks, they existed in this bubble. Victor learned the terminology of neonatology. He learned how to change a diaper on a baby so small it felt impossible. He learned to feed Leo with a tiny bottle. Maya watched this transformation with a growing sense of wonder, but also a new kind of anxiety. Knowing the truth, that Victor was repaying a 30-year-old debt to her dead mother, was a relief, but it also created a new burden. She wasn't just a random person he helped. She was a living marker of his past trauma. Was his kindness genuine care for her and Leo, or was he just trying to exorcise his own ghosts? Was she a person to him, or a project to balance his spiritual ledger? 3 weeks later, the day they brought Leo home, the city was bathed in brilliant, sharp winter sunshine. Dr. Thorne had given Leo a clean bill of health. He was still small, but his lungs were strong, his appetite ravenous. Victor insisted on driving them himself. No chauffeur. He buckled Leo's unnecessarily expensive car seat into the back of a reinforced Range Rover. Maya sat in the back with the baby, watching Victor's knuckles turn white on the steering wheel as he navigated New York traffic with paranoid caution. When the private elevator opened directly into the penthouse, Maya felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The last time she had entered this space, she was a desperate, filthy intruder. Now she was, what? The mother of the heir, the honored guest. The penthouse had changed. The sterile, museum-like quality was gone. The sharp edges of the modern furniture seemed softer. There were blankets draped over sofas. And the smell, the cold scent of marble and expensive air conditioning, was replaced by the warm, milky scent of a baby. Victor led her down the hallway past the East Wing guest suite to a door she hadn't opened before. "I had this prepared," Victor said quietly, opening the door. Maya gasped. It was a nursery. But not just any nursery. It was a room straight out of a fairy tale, decorated in soft creams and pale blues. A hand-carved wooden crib dominated the center. The shelves were lined with leather-bound children's classics. A massive, plush rocking chair sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, which offered a stunning view of the park. It was beautiful, perfect, and incredibly overwhelming. Maya walked into the room, touching the soft cashmere blanket in the crib. She turned to Victor, who was watching her anxiously. "Victor, this is too much. You've already done so much. The hospital bills, saving us from Samir. I can never repay this." "Stop," Victor said, stepping into the room. "We've discussed this. There is no debt between us, Maya, not anymore." "But there is," she insisted, her voice shaking slightly. "You might feel that way, but I don't. I'm living in your house, eating your food, wearing clothes you bought. My son is sleeping in a crib that costs more than a car. And I have nothing to offer in return. I'm still just the girl from the alley. Knowing about her mother hadn't erased her insecurity, it had just shifted its focus. Before she felt like an intruder, now she felt like an obligation. Victor walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She met his eyes. "You are not the girl from the alley. You are Maya Sharma. You survived things that would have broken stronger people. You protected your son with a ferocity that humbled me, and you are the daughter of the only person who ever showed me kindness when I had nothing." His voice dropped, becoming rougher. "You don't have to offer anything in return, Maya. Your presence here, Leo's presence. It makes this place feel like a home for the first time since I bought it. You are doing me the favor." Not the other way around. Maya looked at him, stunned by his admission. The Iceman was admitting he was lonely, admitting he needed them. She didn't know what to say. She was saved by a soft whimper from the car seat Victor was holding. Leo was waking up, and he was hungry. The moment of intensity broke. Maya took the baby, settling into the rocking chair to feed him. Victor stood watching them for a moment, a look of profound peace on his face, before quietly leaving the room. For a few days, life settled into a new, quiet rhythm. They were a strange little unit, the billionaire, the survivor, and the baby, existing in a luxurious bubble high above the city. But bubbles, no matter how thick the glass, are destined to burst. It started on a Tuesday morning. Maya was in the kitchen, feeling brave enough to make her own coffee instead of waiting for the staff. The house was quiet. Victor had gone into the office for the first time since the birth, needing to put out fires at Sterling Global that had flared up during his absence. Mrs. Albright entered the kitchen. Her demeanor toward Maya had shifted from hostility to a terrified deference since Victor had threatened her with jail time. "Ms. Sharma," Mrs. Albright said, her voice tight. "Mr. Sterling just called. He's on his way back. He said you are not to look at the television, or your phone, or go near the windows." Maya frowned, setting down her mug. "What? Why is something wrong with Victor? He is fine, but there has been a development." Before Maya could ask what that meant, her phone, which was sitting on the marble island, lit up with a news alert. She had set up Google Alerts for Victor's name weeks ago, trying to understand the man who had taken her in. The headline screamed out in bold, black letters against the white screen. The NY Post, the billionaire and the beggar. Victor Sterling's secret homeless mistress and love child living in $50M penthouse. Maya's blood ran cold. She grabbed the phone, her hands shaking. It was everywhere. TMZ Daily Mail, page 6. The story was a viral sensation within minutes. The articles were vicious. They painted Victor as a mentally unstable tycoon taken in by a grifting streetwalker. They speculated wildly about Leo's paternity. They used unflattering, grainy photos of Maya from security cameras that must have been leaked. And the source? It was anonymous, but the venom was unmistakable. Sources close to Sterling say he was manipulated by a damsel in distress act and has moved a pregnant vagrant into his home, kicking out his high society fiancée, Candace Van Der Woodson, in the process. "He's not in his right mind," says a former insider. "She's got him wrapped around her finger. It's disgusting." Candace. Even ruined, even exiled from her social circle, she had found a way to strike back. She had weaponized the truth, twisting it into something sordid and ugly. A low, droning sound started outside. Maya looked toward the massive living room windows. Mrs. Albright rushed forward. "Ms. Sharma, please stay away from the glass." Maya ignored her. She walked to the window and looked down. 50 stories below, the street was choked with news vans, satellite trucks, and a swarm of paparazzi. The flashes of their cameras popped like distant gunfire, even in the daylight. And then something hovered into view right outside the window. A drone, equipped with a high-resolution camera, buzzing like a giant, angry insect against the glass. Maya stumbled back, horrified. Her sanctuary had been breached. The glass walls that had offered stunning views now felt like the walls of a fishbowl, exposing her and her son to a hungry, judging world. The private elevator dinged. Victor burst out. He was furious, radiating an energy that was terrifying to behold. He went straight to Maya, grabbing her shoulders, turning her away from the windows. "Don't look at them," he commanded, his voice vibrating with rage. "Did you read it?" Maya nodded mutely, tears stinging her eyes. "Candace, I'll deal with her. Again, permanently this time," Victor snarled. But right now, we have to deal with this. He gestured to the siege outside. They're calling me a grifter, Victor, Maya whispered. They're saying disgusting things about Leo, about you. They are vultures, they feed on garbage, it doesn't matter what they say. It matters to me, Maya cried, pulling away from him. Look at this, I can't live like this, Victor. I can't raise my son in a fishbowl where everyone thinks his mother is a whore who tricked a billionaire. The shame was burning her up. She had spent months trying to survive, trying to keep her dignity intact while sleeping in alleys. Now the whole world was judging her based on Candace's lies. I have to leave, Maya said, panic rising. If I leave, they'll stop. I'll take Leo. We'll go somewhere no one knows us. You are not going anywhere. Victor's voice boomed through the apartment, making Mrs. Albright jump in the kitchen. He grabbed Maya's hands, holding them tightly, forcing her to look at him. The rage in his eyes damped down, replaced by fiery determination. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. You are not running away. You are not hiding. Candace wants you to feel shame. She wants to drive you out. We are not going to let her win. But how do we stop this? Maya gestured helplessly at the drone still buzzing outside. They won't stop until they have a story. Victor looked past her, out the window at the swarm of media below. His jaw set hard. The calculating machine in his brain was working furiously. Candace had tried to use the media to destroy them. Victor realized in that moment that the only way to fight back was to use the same weapon. But he wouldn't just spin the story. He would drop a nuclear bomb on it. He looked back at Maya. They want a story? Fine, I'll give them the biggest story of the decade. He let go of her hands and pulled out his phone. He dialed his head of public relations. Sarah, it's Victor. Cancel my schedule for tomorrow. Call a press conference. Yes, a formal one. In the lobby of Sterling Tower at 10 a.m. He paused, listening to the confused sputtering on the other end. What is it about? It's about the future of Sterling Global and my personal life. Invite everyone. The Times, the Journal, CNN, and yes, invite the tabloids too. I want the whole world watching. He hung up the phone and turned to Maya. The Iceman was gone. In his place was a man ready to burn down the world to protect what was his. Tomorrow, Victor said, his voice low and intense, we end this, once and for all. The lobby of Sterling Tower was transformed into a media circus. A raised platform with a podium and microphones had been set up in front of the massive abstract steel sculpture that dominated the space. Hundreds of reporters, photographers, and camera crews packed the area, a sea of lenses and bright lights aimed at the empty stage. The air buzzed with anticipation and cynical speculation. They were here for blood, for the public meltdown of a titan. Upstairs in the penthouse, the atmosphere was equally charged but silent. Maya stood in front of a full-length mirror in her bedroom. She was wearing a navy blue silk dress that Victor had chosen for her. It was elegant, conservative, and screamed old money power. Her hair was styled in a sleek, professional bob, and a makeup artist had covered the last traces of her exhaustion. She looked like a CEO's wife. She looked nothing like the woman who had been eating out of a garbage can a month ago. She felt like a fraud in a very expensive costume. Victor entered the room. He was dressed in his armor, a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, a dark blue tie. He looked invincible. He stopped behind her, looking at their reflections in the mirror. You look beautiful, he said. It was a simple statement of fact, devoid of romance, but it made Maya blush. I feel ridiculous, she admitted. Like I'm playing dress-up. Victor, what are we doing? What are you going to say down there? Victor turned her to face him. His hands rested lightly on her shoulders. We are going to tell the truth, not Candace's twisted version of it, our truth. But the whole truth about my mother, about the diner, every word of it, it's the only way to stop the lies. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Maya felt a surge of panic. That story was so personal, so sacred to her. To share it with the vipers downstairs felt like a violation. Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. Victor's grip on her shoulders tightened slightly. His blue eyes, usually so cold, burned with an intensity that stopped her breath. Maya, look at where you were a month ago. Look at where you are now. You survived, you fought, you won, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Candace is the one who should be ashamed. Today we take back the narrative. Are you with me? Maya looked into his eyes. She saw the resolve there, the unwavering strength that had pulled her out of the gutter. She thought of Leo, safe upstairs with a nanny. She thought of her mother, who had taught her to be kind even when the world was cruel. She took a deep breath, straightening her spine. The costume didn't feel fake anymore. It felt like armor. I'm with you, she said. Victor nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. Good, let's go make some headlines. A hush fell over the crowd as Victor Sterling emerged from the private elevator bank, Maya walking a half step behind him. The camera shutters went wild, a deafening barrage of clicks and flashes. Victor walked to the podium, his expression stony. Maya stood to his right, slightly behind him, hands clasped in front of her, chin up, facing the glare of the lights without flinching. Victor adjusted the microphones. He didn't offer a greeting. I called this press conference to address the recent defamatory rumors circulating about my private life, Victor began, his voice booming through the speakers, and to make an announcement regarding the future of Sterling Global. He paused, letting the tension build. For the past week, the tabloids have been fed a diet of lies by a vindictive former associate, Ms. Candace Van Der Woodson. These lies were designed to humiliate an innocent woman and destroy my reputation. A murmur went through the crowd at the direct naming of Candace. The woman standing beside me is Maya Sharma, Victor continued, gesturing to Maya. The press has called her a beggar, a grifter, a mistress. She is none of those things. Victor looked out at the sea of cynical faces. 30 years ago, I was a 15-year-old runaway on the streets of Chicago. I was starving, I was freezing, I was ready to die. The room went deathly silent. The reporters, pencils poised, stared at the billionaire who was confessing to a past none of them knew existed. A woman working a late shift in a diner saved my life that night. She gave me food. She gave me money. But most importantly, she gave me kindness when the rest of the world gave me nothing. That woman's name was Sarah Sharma. Victor turned and looked at Maya. Maya is Sarah's daughter. I did not find her by accident. I did not take her in as some pet project. I took her in because I owed her mother a debt that could never be fully repaid. Maya felt tears pricking her eyes, but she held them back. She could feel the shift in the room, the cynicism replaced by stunned disbelief. Maya was found in a desperate situation, yes, because she was failed by the systems that are supposed to protect the vulnerable. But she is not a victim, she is a survivor, and she is the bravest person I know. Victor turned back to the cameras. Now came the part that would shake the financial world to its foundations. Which brings me to the future of this company. I have built an empire, but an empire without a legacy is just a pile of money. I have no children of my own, no heirs. He took a breath, preparing to drop the bomb. This morning, I executed a series of irrevocable trusts and legal documents. He paused for effect. Effective immediately, I am legally adopting Maya's son, Leo Sharma. He will take the name Leo Sterling, and he is now the sole heir to the Sterling global empire and my entire personal fortune, currently valued at approximately $25 billion. Gasps ripped through the room. Cameras flashed frantically. Reporters started shouting questions, abandoning all protocol. A $25 billion baby, it was insane, it was unheard of. Victor held up a hand for silence, he wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, his voice cutting through the noise, I have appointed Maya Sharma as the managing trustee of Leo's estate until he comes of age. She will have a seat on the board of directors of Sterling Global with full voting rights effective immediately. She is no longer my guest, she is my partner. Maya stared at Victor's profile, stunned. He hadn't told her this part. A board seat, managing trustee. He wasn't just giving them money, he was giving them power. He was handing her the keys to his kingdom. Victor looked at the stunned reporters one last time. So write your stories, call me crazy, call me sentimental, I don't care, the truth is out. Maya and Leo are my family, and anyone who comes after them comes after me. And I promise you, that is a fight you will lose. He stepped back from the podium, put a protective hand on Maya's back, and guided her away from the microphones. Mr. Sterling, is it true you and Ms. Sharma are romantically involved? Shouted a reporter from CNN. Victor stopped, he looked at Maya. The connection between them in that moment was undeniable. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something deeper. It was shared trauma, shared secrets, and a shared commitment to a tiny life upstairs. Victor turned back to the microphone one last time. That, he said with a faint, enigmatic smile, is none of your damn business. He led Maya back to the elevators, leaving the media in absolute chaos behind them. 1 year later, the penthouse was full of noise. It was Leo's first birthday party. It was a small affair, just close friends and a few business associates Victor trusted. Leo, now a chubby, happy 1-year-old, was sitting in a high chair covered in cake frosting, laughing as Maya tried to wipe his face. He had his mother's amber eyes and a shock of dark hair. Maya laughed too, dodging his frosting-covered hands. She looked radiant. The haunted look was gone from her eyes, replaced by confidence and joy. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, no longer feeling the need to wear a costume in her own home. Over the past year, she had taken her role seriously. She had hired tutors, learned about finance and philanthropy. She was using the Sterling Foundation to fund shelters and job training programs for women in situations like the one she had escaped. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Victor stood by the bar, watching them. He held a glass of scotch, but he wasn't drinking it. He was just smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had changed too, the Iceman had thawed. He worked less, came home earlier. The penthouse was no longer a silent tomb. It was a home filled with the chaotic, beautiful noise of a family. He walked over to the high chair. "Need some help with the monster?" he asked Maya. "I think we're losing the battle," she laughed, wiping frosting from her own cheek. Victor took a napkin and gently wiped the frosting from Maya's face. His hand lingered for a moment on her cheek. They looked at each other. The air between them shifted, charged with a new kind of energy. The shared history, the mutual respect, the co-parenting, it was evolving into something else, something warm and real. "Happy birthday, little man," Victor whispered to Leo, kissing the top of his messy head. He looked at Maya. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For saving me." Maya smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "We saved each other, Victor. We saved each other." They stood there together, watching their son destroy his birthday cake, surrounded by the warmth of the home they had built out of the ashes of their pasts. The beggar and the billionaire, the orphan and the Iceman. They had both started with nothing in their own ways. And in the end, they had found everything that truly mattered.
Thank you so much for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Black Women's Soul Stories. As the sun set over the city Victor Sterling once thought he owned, he finally realized that his greatest wealth wasn't sitting in a bank account. It was sitting in a high chair covered in birthday cake. Sarah's simple act of kindness 30 years ago hadn't just saved a starving boy. It had planted a seed that bloomed decades later to save her own daughter and grandson. This story is a powerful reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever truly wasted, proving that karma always comes back around. If Victor's journey from a cold billionaire to a loving father touched your heart, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Victor was right to destroy Candace's life, or did he go too far? Until next time.